Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you're watching fourth part of What If Naruto Had a Sexy Vampire Bodyguard. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
It would be a vast understatement to say that Naruto was experiencing some stir-crazy moments. The Konoha team was met by Temari, who had been waiting for them at the main gates, shortly after they arrived in Suna. She gave them a curt order to accompany her. Additionally, they saw the dejected looks on the faces of the majority of the villagers as they strolled through the village. Temari said that the village was very concerned about their case cage in response to Naruto's question about why everyone was dejected. Naruto used a simile when he heard that the people in Suna were concerned about Gaara. It was Gaara. He was acknowledged and trusted by the village. Naruto was certain that Gaara was deserving of the title of case cage after everything that he had endured in his life. The blonde found it astounding how much care and worry they had for their case cage. And it caused Naruto to ponder what life might have been like if both he and Gaara had been born in Suna. He also felt a tiny twinge of jealousy in the recesses of his mind. Nevertheless, he dismissed that idea. His home was Konoha. It was there that he bled, where he was born, and where he formed the relationships that he held dear. There was nothing Konoha could be traded for, even though he wants to exchange a few of the village's residents. That was thrown out the window by the blonde. Temari had responded to Naruto's question about casualties during the Akatsuki attack by saying that 2 gate guards had been slain and numerous others injured. Furthermore, due to poisoning, her brother Kankuro was in critical condition and on the verge of death. The blonde instantly demanded to be brought to Kankuro's hospital room upon hearing that. Gaara's blonde sister obeyed and guided them to the hospital. They ascended the stairs and entered Kankuro's room there. As soon as Naruto noticed Kankuro's condition, he gave Sakura the order to try her hardest to rid him of the unidentified poison in his veins. After her violent attempt to hurt Shiroi, Sakura made the decision to give up trying to push her luck. The girl with pink hair dutifully started to examine the poisoned version of Kankuro without saying anything. The group met Chiyo, an elder in the village, during this process. Who had thought Kakashi was the White Fang of Konoha? The older woman tried to attack the masked Jonin as a result. Attempted is the key word here, because before she could harm Kakashi, she was stopped by another elder, name of Guy the First Forgot, who seemed to know Chiyo well. When Naruto questioned Kakashi about the identity of the White Fang, the latter revealed that it was his father. All Naruto had done was raise an eyebrow in interest. Shiroi turned her attention to the window, appearing utterly uninterested in what was happening, and looked at the lowering sun. Chachizero, meanwhile, was miffed that there had been no bloodshed. Kyuubi just gave the older woman a sneer. It was evident that the woman harbored a grudge against Kakashi's father. And no genius could have failed to see that the woman was still clinging to that silly grudge. It merely provided Kyuubi with more justification for his intense dislike of most people. The only people he didn't despise were his father Rikudo and, despite his refusal to acknowledge it, his current favorite Jinchuriki, Naruto. Shiroi isn't human, so she didn't count. And so it went, with the blonde having to wait for Sakura to complete healing Kankuro while Kakashi read his book in silence and occasionally burst out laughing. It appeared as though Chiyo was sleeping, despite the fact that she appeared dead. Chachizero fiddling with his hair, and Shiroi staring out the window. A twitch appeared on the blonde's eyebrow after a few minutes. The awareness that Kyuubi was snickering didn't even remotely assist. The blonde was certain he heard the blade rattling softly, even though he was unaware of Altair. Indeed, he was growing irritated very rapidly. Luckily, Temari had shown up, and she explained that the village's acting cage had requested his presence due to Gaara's absence. That attracted the attention of all. The blonde inquired as to who the acting cage was. Temari answered that it was the girlfriend of Gaara. The blonde looked at Temari as though she had just told him Orochimaru had admitted he liked little boys, causing Naruto to choke on his own saliva. Temari laughed at the blonde, claiming that when she found out that Gaara was seeing the girl, she felt the same way. When Naruto inquired about Gaara's girlfriend's name, Yui was the girl's name, Temari retorted, making Shiroi's ears stand up, and the white-haired girl gave the sandy blonde a quick glance. Soon after, Shiroi announced that she would go with Naruto to meet with their acting leader. Reluctant at first, Tamari eventually gave in when Shiroi declared she would go either way, and that it would be preferable if she allowed her to, willingly, go with her fiancé, giving Tamari her evil eye in the process. At Shiroi's words and her evil gaze, Tamari swallowed hard. Reluctantly, the sandy blonde let her attend Naruto's meeting with their acting cage, leaving Sakura in the hospital to carry out Kankuro's recovery. In addition, Elder Chiyo will offer any help she can, and Kakashi will watch over the pink-haired Chunin. With haste, the three of Naruto, Shiroi, and Tamari left the hospital and made their way straight to the cage building, which brought up the reason for Naruto's apparent crazy state. His patience, which had been eroding ever since Sakura's violent outburst at Shiroi and Akatsuki's attack, was slowly running out as each minute went by. He had already been waiting in the waiting room for at least 50 minutes. Chachizero continued to fiddle with the blonde's tresses, laughing sporadically as she appeared to entangle herself in the spiky mess Naruto referred to as his hair. She would then figure out a way out of her trap and repeat the entire process. But Shiroi was leaning back in her chair, her eyes closed. She would have appeared to be asleep to anyone else. But Naruto was aware that his sweetheart was truly in a state of meditation. Why? He wouldn't interfere with her meditation for anything, even if he didn't know. When was the last time he? Let's just say that the blast had such a strong killing intent that it caused even the Kyuubi to whimper in terror. Was not enjoyable. The blonde had since made it her mission never to wake Shiroi from her meditation. For his own well-being. Sighing, the blonde said she had nothing to do, and made the decision to meditate with Shiroi since it will pass the time faster. With a strange expression, the blonde closed his eyes. He took some time to begin his meditations. Rather, the blonde discovered that he was reflecting on the past of the Elemental Nation, or the Shinobi Clan Wars, to be more precise. But he heard two names above all others: Uchiha Madara and Senju Hirashirama, a pair of the greatest shinobi in world history. They are both compared to the great sage of the Six Paths, the shinobi's deity. He was not sure why, but he respected and liked both of them. During his journey with Jiraiya, the Sannin essentially made him sit down and conversed with him about the history of the elemental nations from an unbiased perspective. Additionally, two names surfaced nearly every time Konoha was brought up as Naruto, reluctantly, learned about the past of the other villages. Naturally, those were Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. The Shoden Hokage was admired by the blonde for his principles and convictions. No matter how distant or absurd the goal appeared to be, he sincerely believed that peace was achievable despite the age he lived in. The blonde looked up to Madara because of his strength and his cool, collected demeanor. It was said that the legendary Uchiha was unfazed by anything, that he had the same level of composure and calmness as an eagle hunting its prey. He also appreciated Madara's perspective on the world, based on what Jiraiya had told him thus far, prior to his brother's passing. During the difficult periods in the clan wars, Madara sincerely believed in defending the Uchiha clan. Together with his Uchiha allies, he battled and suffered bloodshed when his brother was killed. His brother had given him his sight so that he could find the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan after he lost his way. Of course, others thought Madara killed his brother in order to get the Sharingan's last stage. That was never fully verified, though. From that moment on, Madara had committed himself to defending his clan against all enemies. You were threatening Madara's clan, or his dream of defending it. Then you were an enemy that needed to be brutally destroyed. Jiraiya told him Madara had a simple philosophy on life. Madara's attitude was, "I will annihilate every aspect of your existence without any regrets if you dared to threaten my clan." Granted, it was a little dim, but oddly enough. In fact, Naruto appreciated that. Naruto respected Uchiha Madara a great deal, though he wasn't sure why. That was like a strong desire to show the Uchiha respect. It's true that Madara was feared by all. The only people who do not fear him are Senju Tobirama and Senju Hashirama. Nevertheless, despite what he had been told about the Uchiha in the stories, Naruto had no fear of him at all. Actually, though, when he heard some of the insults that Jiraiya had told him many shinobi had for the Uchiha, he felt something. He had the urge to protect the Uchiha's honor and reputation. Neither did he know why. It was merely innate. Oddly, he experienced the same things every time he heard Senju Tobirama being insulted by some Iwanin. He sensed a bond between the two of them. He was clueless as to why. Though Kyubi knew why, the giant fox chose to keep that information to himself for the time being. The sound of Temari's voice startled the blonde out of his reverie. Temari gave the blonde a poke in the cheek and said, "Uzumaki. San, Yui will see you now." With a twitch appearing in his eyes, the golden-haired blonde said, "May I incline as to why you are poking my cheeks, Temari?" "San? I was intrigued to find out if those whiskers on your face were genuine." The sandy blonde continued to prod his cheeks. "Please stop, Temari. San. I'm pretty sure Chachizero Chan isn't liking what you're doing." Temari looked up at the green-haired doll perched atop his head, only to discover the cute little doll spinning a less than innocent knife on her hands while grinning innocently. Temari swallowed, feeling pretty sure she could beat a doll. But she had a gut feeling that fighting that doll was going to be extremely tough, if not fatal. And something tells her that the doll would be laughing like a kid in a candy store if she were to knock it around. Thus, the sandy blonde ignored his playful jabs at her and focused on Shiroi instead. Sister Gaara moved to Shiroi's meditating form and said, "I guess I'll wake up Shiroi." "San." Naruto yelled, "Wait. Temari, stop, you fool." But it was already too late. For a brief moment, Shiroi was shaken by the second Temari. Every person in the room, including a few shinobi who were present, was shot with a killing intent so strong that it dwarfed the killing intent of a Biju. Very slowly and eerily, Shiroi's head turned to face Temari. And the sandy blonde saw firsthand how the slit in Shiroi's eyes was getting dangerously smaller. Her eyes flickered from pink to blood red. And everyone's spines tingled when the silver-haired girl with white hair spoke. She said, "Temari. San, could you please explain why you interrupted my meditation?" In a sweet, cheerful voice and with a charming smile on her face. The desire to kill also appeared to have multiplied tenfold. It scared the hell out of everyone there, if anything. A few shinobi passed out, a few foamed at the mouth, and a few broke down and started whispering to themselves. Part of what they were saying was understandable to Naruto, despite the fact that he sat in his seat terrified. Things such as, "Mom? Mommy, is that you?" Or something like, "Takeshi is a good boy," could be heard. However, the blonde's main concern was the Kyubi that was inside of him. "Hey, Kyubi, are you okay? Kurama isn't bad. Kurama is a good little fox." Naruto heard nothing more than that. "Kyubi? Kurama, who the hell is he?" "No one. Kurama is just a really good friend of mine." "Oh, yeah. Oh. Okay." Knowing that Kyubi was always the one most impacted when Shiroi revealed her killing intent in this way, the blonde made the sensible decision to back off and not pursue the matter further. But Chachizero was laughing uncontrollably, staring at every shinobi in the room with a predatory sort of look. She had the best masters in the world, really. If only she could spill a little blood now. When Naruto put his hand on the hilt of Altair's sheath, the creature stopped rattling in fear. Man, didn't he have the best owner in the world? With her sugary, sweet smile still on her face, Shiroi said, "Temari. San. I asked you a question. So please answer, before I decide to use other methods for you to speak." Temari, a sandy blonde, almost squeaked as she swallowed, "Yui will see you and Naruto now." Shiroi stood up from her chair and said, "Oh? Is that so? Alright then, I guess I can let your interruption slide." And with that, the intention to kill vanished in an instant, relieving everyone in the room. Shiroi stood up instantly and made her way to the Kazecage's office door. Naruto got up and followed her to the door since he needed to meet the acting Kazekage. Furthermore, he thinks that even a mere second lateness would not go down well with the acting cage. When the two, Chachizero excluded, went into the Kazekage's office, they saw a girl with black hair seated at the desk. The girl with black hair was writing slowly on paper while maintaining a neutral expression on her face. Though Naruto wasn't positive, he was certain that anger was simmering silently beneath her expression of indifference. He could see faint bags under her eyes and noticed that her eyes appeared slightly puffy and red. But it might have been all in his head. In addition, she appeared paler than the rest of Suna. The enormous bat, like wings Naruto wore on her back, though, were what really attracted her attention. Yet one of them appeared to have numerous bandages on it. Shiroi's voice broke the hush that had descended on the office. The slivery white-haired girl said, a grin tugging at the corners of her mouth, "Well, I'm surprised to see you again after all these years, cry baby Yui." The black-haired girl said, staring at the girl in front of her and giving the blonde next to her a curious glance. Yui looked up, surprise shining in her yellow eyes. "Shiroi? Is that you? I haven't seen since Sensei died, and you told us it was time to go our separate ways." With a tiny smirk on her lips, Shiroi said, "Yeah, it has been a while, hasn't it? What's this I hear about you becoming a girlfriend to the case cage?" Yui's voice became hushed, and the life in her eyes faded a little. "It has been fun, and the happiest time of my life. But now I can barely smile as is," she replied. Yui's answer caused Naruto to raise an eyebrow. "The council has decided not to send too many shinobi to go search for Gaara, as the last time they did that, they were attacked. Not to mention we barely have any shinobi who hardly even reach the level of S rank. We mostly have high A rank shinobi, and they stand no chance against that of the likes Akatsuki." Here she let out a frustrated sigh. "Not to mention the council are all piling the paperwork on me since Gaara was kidnapped. Me and Gaara has told them time and time again, we cannot sign things such as these." The girl with black hair grabbed a document. "Listen to this. This is the same villager who has been asking for some funds to build a planting business. Ever since Gaara was taken, some of the villagers are taking advantage of Gaara's kidnapping." She let out a frustrated grunt. Yui complained, taking a stamp with the words "denied" on it. "Honestly, we told the village as a whole that we don't have enough funds. Stupid villagers. I can't even believe that they would try to take advantage of Gaara's kidnapping." After stamping the document, she went on to the next one. Shiroi gave a blink. She knew another Yui, not this one. She had known a somewhat cheery Yui who also enjoyed making fun of other people. In particular, those she loved. She will put in twice as much effort to divert her attention and becomes more agitated when she is depressed. It appears that Gaara was more affected by her kidnapping than she initially realized. And Yui was overworking herself because that was the only way she knew how to handle it. But in the process, she was growing increasingly agitated. Moreover, when Yui is agitated, to put it mildly, things usually get bending reality. A succubus such as Yui possesses both illusions and charm, which enables her to compel people of the other gender to serve her. Yui's skills were mostly focused on deception. She had extraordinary skill at creating illusions. She would be able to submerge you in an illusion so strong that, although only a few seconds would pass, it would seem as though years passed. Shiroi ought to be aware, since Yui managed to fool her with such a deception. Shiroi never saw the need to learn illusions, even though she was incredibly strong. Shiroi consequently only learned how to recognize and dispel illusions, not how to cast them. Yui was more skilled at illusions. Yui's specialization in illusions left her somewhat deficient in other areas. Despite not having illusions, Yui was still strong. She could still give a Jonin like Kakashi a good workout without any illusions. But when Yui is angry, her delusions get out of control. Even though she specializes in illusions, Yui still struggles with some illusion techniques. Techniques like Yui's own illusions art, a fantasy of a hellish paradise, were particularly challenging for her to master. Her tactic was to ensnare you in a bright beach resort that appeared to be nothing more than heaven. But all of that was a lie because the illusion only drastically changes after a few seconds. It transforms from the sunny resort to a resort that looks like it belongs in hell. The sky was red as blood and was ablaze with red flames. The sea turning a deep scarlet as scores of demonic sharks swam in it. The healthy trees began to wither until the black husks of death were all that were left. To your own horror, you would discover that the tainted oxygen in the air would cause your own skin to melt off of you. Not to mention that unless you had even greater control over illusions than Yui did, you were unable to escape the illusion no matter what you attempted to do. Alternatively, you had assistance from someone to help you escape the delusion. It was only because Shiroi's raw Yuki was stronger than Yui's that she was able to overcome that particular illusion. Shiroi gave a slight shake of her head and turned her attention to Yui, who was once again writing frantically on the different papers. Reluctant to speak, the white-haired girl sighed with annoyance, realizing Yui was clearly not in the mood for a reunion. Even though she really wanted to call her out by her nickname, damn it. She snickered to herself in her head, oh well, I can tease after we save the Kazakage crybaby Yui. While he was still in the presence of the village's acting cage, Naruto, whose curiosity was burning with intense heat, remained silent. He had learned politics from Jiraiya, as well as how to act appropriately around cages and other political figures. After observing Yui for a few minutes longer, Naruto started acting irrationally once more. But when Yui spoke, it was soon broken. She continued, not taking her eyes off her paperwork, I'm sure you're wondering why I called you here. The blonde nodded silently. Whether or not she knew the blonde understood, Yui explained, the reason I called you here is because Baki believes that you and your team will be able to save Gaara. Though I have a few doubts about that, as we are dealing with S-rank shinobi. So of course you understand some of my concerns. So now, a good majority of our shinobi are depending on you and your squad to save, while we hold down the fort here. She let out a snort. I wish I myself could come with to save Gaara, but if Gaara were in my position he would do what's best for the village. And the best I can do for him is continue my duties like he'd want me to. At last, she raised her gaze from her paperwork and cast a fierce look at the blonde. Her voice changed to a pleading whisper, lots of our shinobi are placing their faith in you to save Gaara. Including me. Please. Save Gaara. Her eyes were dripping with sorrow. The blonde fixed his gaze on Yui, and as he put his hand on Altair's hilt, a determined gleam appeared in his eyes. With a determined glint in his eyes, he said, don't worry. You can depend on us, we'll bring Gaara back to you. Perhaps we could also eliminate some Akatsuki bastards, a deep, ominous voice murmured in his subconscious. With a small squint of confusion, Naruto said, Kyuubi. Did you say that? The king of the Biju asked, blinking in bewilderment, what was me? Nothing at all. Though he wasn't entirely sure, Naruto answered, it was nothing at all. Kyuubi just arched an eyebrow in curiosity before shrugging and averting his red eyes. Would have preferred to sleep before their altercation with Akatsuki. After a few moments of staring at the blonde shinobi in front of her, Yui smiled appreciatively. She said with gratitude and a respectful bow of her head, thank you, Naruto. San. With a smile on her face, Shiroi gave the black-haired girl a wink. Yui blinked, then giggled quietly. She gave Shiroi another wink, then looked up at the blonde. Now then. It's not much, but here is the information we were able to obtain from the members of Akatsuki that we encountered. One of them had long blonde hair tied in a high ponytail with a bang covering the right side of his face. From what we were able to gather, this shinobi is able to utilize clay as his Mian form of weaponry. She stopped to ensure that both Naruto and Shiroi had been paying attention. Chachizero listened intently. Making weapons out of clay? It sounded pointless. He uses his clay by forming it into some type of animal, and when they are within a close proximity, they explode. She said bluntly. After a moment of owlish blinking, Shiroi and Naruto simultaneously cocked their heads slightly. Before breaking into a fit of giggles, Chachizero blinked once, twice, thrice, and a fourth time. The concept of explosive clay animals was simply incredible. As Yui noticed their cocked heads, she silently laughed. The other member of Akatsuki. We don't really have any information regarding him as only Kankuro fought him. And since Kankuro is unconscious at the moment, she went on. That means the second person is an unknown at the moment. Naruto thought. Yui silently agreed with his appraisal. Shiroi closed her eyes and said, So we have an unknown, and another whom we just can't miss. I heard from Ero Sensei that to extract a Biju from their host it requires 3 days at least in order for the extraction to be a success. And based on the time it took us to get here, we lost 2 days and a half. If we are to have any hope of saving Gaara we need to move now. Naruto said with a serious edge. Yui nodded. Yes, that is true, and Kankuro must be healed from his poisoned state. From a report I've just gotten from the hospital, Haruno Sakura is currently treating him at the moment. However, it would take a day at best, and by then. She was feeling somewhat depressed. Naruto said somberly, by then the extraction would be complete. There was a brief period of silence in the room before Shiroi said, why not split up? All eyes turned to her in search of an explanation. Seeing this, she kept going. Why not leave Sakura here to treat Kankuro, and we bring along another shinobi of yours with some medical experience. That way we can kill two birds with one stone. She concluded. Yui trailed off, You're suggesting that while Sakura heals Kankuro, we can go and save Gaara with the assistance of another Suna shinobi. That way we can save both Kankuro and Gaara at the same time. Naruto noticed. Shiroi gave a nod of approval, and pride mixed with a hint of conceit emerged in her eyes. They were definitely going to adopt this idea. She proudly puffed out her chest. It was nice to feel better than other people. Of course, not Naruto, since Shiroi already admitted the blonde was stronger than she was. Before heading out the door, Naruto said, I'll go tell Kakashi. Senpai, our next course of action. Waved to the two girls as they went, Shachizero. Now that Naruto was gone, Yui focused on her paperwork again, though she occasionally took a quick look at Shiroi. Shiroi walked over to the window and looked out at the twilight. It was silent for a few moments until Shiroi's gentle voice broke the ice. Don't worry, crybaby Yui. We will save your boyfriend. Naruto let anything distract him from saving him. Trust me. For a brief while, Yui said nothing. The sound of a pen hitting paper was the only sound audible. The sound of something wet repeatedly hitting the desk soon joined that one. Yui's voice, hardly audible above a whisper, said, Shiroi. Thank you. With great care to avoid aggravating her injured wing, Shiroi moved silently towards her and gave her a tight hug. Anything for my sister, now stop crying, crybaby Yui. Shiroi said, taking out a pen and giving Yui some documents to help her with. Yui whispered back to Shiroi, yeah. I promised myself I wouldn't cry anymore. And gave her own hug. Even so, the girl with white hair was nearly completely covered by her ample bust. Shiroi twitched, but did not move aside from holding Yui tighter and going back to work on some papers. At that very moment, the girl with white hair vowed to destroy any motherfuckers who dared to make her sister cry. She was going to hold them accountable. Castration would be regarded as a gift from Kami herself by the time she finished them. Toby sat under a huge subterranean tree in silence. For being subterranean, the tree appeared to be thriving rather astonishingly. The human face that was melted into the tree itself, however, was the most unsettling aspect of the whole thing. When examined more closely, the human face bore a striking resemblance to the Shodem Hokage of Konoha. Toby waited a few more minutes in the quiet before speaking up, resonating throughout the hideout. Zetsu. A white Zetsu clone appeared from the ground below after a tense moment of silence. Yes? Toby remained silent for a few more moments, gazing at the face melted into the tree before he finally said anything. I want you to observe the Kyuubi Jinchuriki very closely when he moves to save the case cage. Why the sudden interest in the Kyuubi Jinchuriki? Asked Zetsu. There has been a change of plans. Instead of extracting the Kyuubi completely, we will only extract a fraction of what is truly needed. The man in the mask replied. The Zetsu clone repeated, why? Toby responded, his Sharingan never taking his eyes off the Shodems, because we will convert the Kyuubi Jinchuriki to our cause. Zetsu questioned, unsure, are you sure he will approve? When he is revived. Toby took a while to respond, and when he did, his voice was icy but blank. He will approve of it. After all, he gets two things out of it. What does he get out it? Not only will he have the power of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki willingly, but he will have someone of his very flesh and blood on his side. Toby said. Incomprehensive, Zetsu uttered, I don't understand. At last, Toby turned to face Zetsu. You're kidding. He created you, yet you do not know of his blood being passed down? He asked, sounding skeptical. Zetsu's eyes widened in realization after briefly narrowing in perplexity. Why? You mean? Toby confirmed, turning back to face the Shoden. Yes, Kyuubi Jinchuriki is of both his descent and that of the Nidaim's descent as well. Zetsu was experiencing only shock at the moment. It is simply unbelievable to consider that both the Nidaim's Hokage and the Kyuubi Jinchuriki were descended from him. But at that moment, confusion flashed through his eyes. Wait, how is he of the Nidaim's descent? Toby curtly replied, Tobirama was the grandfather of the Yondaime. Zetsu's eyes sparkled a bit. Also, that's his connection to the Nidaime. Interesting. But I have to ask. How will you convert him to our cause? From what I observed of him, he doesn't seem likely to join us. Said Zetsu. Everyone can be manipulated, Zetsu. Take Nagato for example. I am manipulating him by using his dream for peace. I have a variety of ways to convert him to my cause. I can tell him the truth of Uchiha Makoto and what truly happened to her. After all, the Sandaime did lie to him when he asked where she went. I can spin a tale that the Itachi was ordered to execute the Uchiha clan because the council feared the Uchiha. Toby paused for a moment to stare at Zetsu. I can get him to view the Uchiha in good light, while keeping the fact that they were planning a coup to overthrow the Hokage. I can tell him of Danzo's intentions with him, and that the Sandaime was very close to accepting Danzo's offer. And based on what you told, his fiancée had a strong dislike for Konoha. I can even use that to plead my case. And finally, he stopped talking to make room for himself on the ground. I can show him a genjutsu of what happened during the Third Shinobi War. I can show him how Kakashi killed her. I can show just how cruel and evil humans can truly be. I can show him other people's pain and misery. I can show him the cold hard truth of reality, and that the peace his sensei has been dreaming of is nothing but a fantasy. Toby said with a cold face. So you are really serious about having the Kyuubi Jinchuriki on our side? Asked Zetsu. Yes, I do mean business, the man in the mask replied. The Zetsu clone melted into the earth below him and said, very well, I'll keep an eye on the Kyuubi Jinchuriki during his rescue attempt on the Kazakage. With narrowed eyes, Naruto looked at the person in front of him. He, Kakashi, Shiroi, and a retired Suna shinobi, who was actually Chiyo, left the Sand Village a few hours ago. The blonde had headed straight for the hospital after his meeting with the acting Kazakage to inform the others of their strategy. Sakura naturally became irate and angry when she realized she was being abandoned. However, she was quickly stopped in her tracks by an icy glare from Naruto and Kakashi. She understood the pink-haired girl when she learned that she was staying to heal Kankuro. And when a nurse informed her that Kankuro required additional care, her medical instincts took over. The blonde informed Kakashi that Sakura would be compensating for her absence by healing Kankuro rather than taking on S-rank shinobi. They would be joined in their battle for Gaara by a shinobi from Suna. All they required was for someone to offer their assistance. That issue was promptly resolved, though, when Chiyo offered to help. He and Kakashi raised their eyebrows in doubt, but they gave in when she declared she would come regardless of what they said. Shiroi showed up a short while later and declared she was prepared to move out. The group set out with Pakun's assistance, whom Kakashi summoned so he could smell a rag discovered on Kankuro's person, determined to find the Akatsuki hideout before they completed the Ichibi extraction. They ran through the deserts for several hours without stopping, and when they arrived at the forest, they rested for an hour. When they had finished their rest, the group immediately set out again. Naruto heard Chiyo talking to Kakashi about why they would risk their lives to save Gaara when they didn't even know him well during their journey through the forests. In response, Kakashi said that Konoha and Suna were allies and that Konoha always stands by its allies. In response, Kakashi said that Naruto valued this mission greatly. Both Naruto and Gaara understand each other better than most people do. This is because they have a similar burden, Kakashi said in response to Chiyo's question about why that was. After putting two and two together, Chiyo bowed her head solemnly. About an hour later, Chiyo asked why Shiroi was assisting when it seemed like she couldn't care less. In response, Kakashi said that he didn't know much about Shiroi other than the fact that she was Naruto's fiancée and that the only reason she came was that she appeared to be familiar with their acting cage. He also thought that she might have come because she didn't think Sakura would keep her distance from Naruto. That final thought, though, Kakashi kept to himself. After a few minutes, Pakun announced that they were about to encounter a fresh aroma. The group froze, and two of them ran into a clearing to confront a person they knew all too well. The person in front of them was someone they would never forget. A low ponytail is worn on long black hair. His nose has two vertical lines on either side, and a cut forehead protector has the Konoha symbol inserted into it. A cloak with a high collar embroidered with red clouds. And at last, two Sharingan eyes. It could only be one individual. Naruto stuttered, staring blankly at the Uchiha's expressionless face. Uchiha. Itachi. The Uchiha killer said, impassively, "Hello Naruto." "Kun. It has been quite some time." His eyes briefly flashed with interest before they dulled. The blonde said, his body tense as he avoided meeting the Uchiha's gaze. "That it has. Shiroi. Chan, whatever you do, don't look into his eyes," he said quietly. The blonde looked at his fiancée when he didn't get a response. To find her gazing straight ahead, her eyes glazed over as though she didn't even exist. When the blonde's head snapped back towards Itachi, his fears were validated, causing his eyes to widen. The eyes of the previous Konoha shinobi resembled a pinwheel. The blonde balled his fists, but when the Uchiha abruptly staggered back, his eyes, as well as Chiyo's and Kakashi's, widened in shock. His gaze appeared to be. He appeared hollow and fractured, and they sensed a faint chill coursing through his body. When they turned to face Shiroi, they saw that she was beaming maniacally and had a dark gleam in her eyes. Just now in Tsukuyomi, Itachi. With an owlish blink, Shiroi surveyed her new surroundings. She was unaware of what had just occurred. She was standing next to Naruto and gazing into. Once more, what was his name? Itachi? Itaga? Itachi? Yes, Itachi was the one. Whatever the case, she was simply gazing into his eyes when they transformed into a new pattern. Abruptly, she discovered herself in a strange realm where the hues were completely reversed. Seeing a black moon did not appeal to her. It didn't feel quite right. An unfamiliar voice said, "Welcome to the world of Tsukuyomi." From behind her. "Would you look at that?" she said, slowly turning her head to face the person behind her. Whoa, what a surprise, it was Itachi. "Alright, not really." Looking curiously at the red sky, the white-haired girl answered, "Yeah, I kind of figured I was somewhere different." "That kind of sky was really lovely," Itachi said, ignoring the girl in front of him. "In this world, I am God." Shiroi was suddenly tied to a cross and hundreds of spears were piercing her body. She let out a cry of agony as the spears tore into her body for a few minutes. The Uchiha with black hair said, "This will happen for the next 72 hours. With coldness. Whichever answer he anticipated was not what he had anticipated. Rather, she was crying out of fear or had fear in her eyes. The girl merely grinned menacingly as she turned to face him. And she started to chuckle. That was the kind of laugh that could have made Pain shudder. It was a sadistic laugh, dark and cruel. The Uchiha asked, a little unnerved by her cruel laugh, "Why are you laughing?" "I conducted some research on this genjutsu you have," Shiroi exclaimed, her smile turning into a frown. Her eyes were becoming thinner, and beneath her pink eyes was a silent feral fury. "How brazilent of him." She was driven by an animal instinct to rip this fucker limb from fucking limb. Is this motherfucker really so bold as to tie her to a cross and beat her with spears? She was going to gradually break him. When she was through with him, his mind was going to be a piece of paste on the fucking floor. And she intended to hold on to him. As a fucking pet, keep him. A servant incapable of independent thought. The extremely dangerous Uchiha killer will be nothing more than her slave for the remainder of his wretched life by the time she is done with him. The mere thought of it made her laugh uncontrollably again. "Research?" Itachi questioned, perplexed. He had no idea that the Mangekyo Sharingan had any information at all. It was also a little concerning. "Oh yes. I did plenty of research on that stupid Sharingan of yours. Especially that disgusting Mangekyo. She replied with disgust. The last Uchiha asked, how? Did you even get information on the Mangekyo? She responded, her smile never going away, you'd be surprised how easy it is to just waltz into the Uchiha compound, and just dig through all the notes there. She had taken advantage of the short time she had in Konoha to exploring the compound of Uchiha. Her tour had also, conveniently, brought her to the clan head's office. Whoever wrote those notes in plain sight was a real moron. Sasuke, meanwhile, sneezed out of nowhere in Orochimaru's hiding place. With a frown, he questioned whether a fucking fangirl was still considering him. She resumed her explanation with Shiroi, even though she was itching to kill something right then. And I must say those notes were indeed very helpful. I learned that the Tsukuyomi requires eye contact, of course. And that it only works if your will is stronger than the person you cast your technique on. Itachi jumped right in, saying, I already know this. Her smile grew wider and her eyes took on a darker sheen than before as she asked. But do you know what happens when that person's will is stronger than your own? Itachi raised an inquisitive eyebrow. He questioned, I have some suspicions as to why. When he found himself unexpectedly mounted on the same cross that he had tied Shiroi to, his eyes widened in sheer horror. The entire forest transformed into an incredibly realistic rendition of Konoha, complete with minute details of the villagers' daily activities. Everything seemed incredibly genuine. The smells, the sounds, the laughter of the kids, the wind brushing against his face. But then the children's laughter abruptly stopped and were replaced with cries of terror and agony. A huge bat-like creature that appeared to have emerged from the depths of hell itself suddenly materialized just outside the village and started murdering the villagers. Shinobi, common people, even kids. He had no choice but to watch this all unfold. This was just horrible torture for someone who gave everything for the village he loved. And throughout it all, the girl with white hair in front of him just laughed. With each passing death, her laugh grew louder. Her eyes turning blood red from their usual pink hue. Those blood-red, slitted eyes shone brightly, a beacon amidst the devastation he was witnessing. His throat burned from the stench of burning flesh. His heart was broken by the sounds of the villagers' agonized screams. One scream stood out above the others, though. His little brother's screams. To his horror, he twisted his terrified gaze to his right. His younger brother was there, wailing in anguish as the white-haired girl tore her hand through his chest. Right into his heart. The most distressing aspect of it was that his younger sibling was staring at him accusingly while he cried out in pain. As though he was the cause of all of his suffering. He muttered, S. Sasuke. N. No. S. Stop. Shiroi just tipped her head, as though considering coming to a complete stop. That idea was quickly disregarded, though, as Itachi experienced pain unlike anything he had ever experienced. His body seemed to be melting right off his bones. It was as though someone had dropped him into an acidic pool and added fire. Style jutsu for good measure. It was only a few moments later that Itachi realized his bones were on fire and that his skin was actually melting off. After what seemed like an eternity, everything finally came to an abrupt stop. Nothing continued to happen. There were no more screams or pain. Nothing more, it's all just ceased. The Uchiha turned to face Shiroi, his eyes full of hope. Is it over? He asked in a hopeful tone. But Shiroi's subsequent remarks crushed his spirit. She exclaimed with delight, 70. 2 hours, 50. 9 minutes and 50. 9 seconds remaining. Itachi's only option was yell. Right now. Staring into Itachi's hollow eyes, Naruto said, Shiroi. Chan. What did you do? Her upbeat response was, he bit off more than he could chew. With a gulp, Kakashi resolved never to share a room with the blatantly evil girl again. Chio just gave a small shudder. With a giggle, Shachizuru wondered if she could learn how to do that from her master. Kyuubi whimpered in the seal, meantime. It was not a cry of terror. That was a manly whimper, that was. True men whimper in a manly way. A man's whimper, or any male's for that matter, is always a manly one. Naruto just stared at her happy face in blankness. With a snort of laughter, he looked back at Itachi's motionless body. On the other hand, Shiroi narrowed her eyes at the Uchiha. Go spy on the Akatsuki on my behalf. Behaving in your typical manner. Go, servant. She gave herself a mental order. Itachi's lifeless mental response was, yes, Shiroi. Sama, and then, right in front of their eyes, it happened. Itachi's body changed completely, becoming someone else entirely. Chio muttered, staring at the body with shock and disbelief, it can't be. He's... Kakashi asked, staring at the lifeless body in front of him, do you know him, Chio? Sama? He was at a loss as to how it was possible. He was certain that they were fighting Itachi. How then? I wonder what his relationship with Akatsuki was, Chio replied. He's a member of the Shinobi Council of Suna. He was reported missing shortly after the attack on the village. Regardless of who he is, it doesn't change the fact that Itachi used some type of jutsu that allowed him to possess someone else's body. Since Itachi tried to delay us, it only means that Akatsuki knows we are coming. So they probably set up a trap. Naruto thought to himself. If that is the case, then we can assume they're expecting us to either come soon or later. Since we just had a run-in with Itachi, we can bet that they are expecting later rather than sooner. Kakashi continued. That's true, that means we have the element of surprise. They won't be expecting us to reach them so soon. That gives us an advantage. Chio said while staring at Shiroi. What a mysterious little girl, she thought to herself. With his form fading into the trees above them, Naruto gave the order, let's move. We wasted enough time here as it is. After letting out a silent sigh at Naruto's single-minded state, Kakashi silently followed him. Chio trailing closely behind. With a final, dark smile, Shiroi sculpted her features and bounded after the three. Itachi shaped his features into a more natural, stoic face while opening his hollow-eyed eyes. A voice from behind him said, you're back a lot sooner than I thought you would be, Itachi. The servant from Uchiha turned to face his Akatsuki partner. Itachi gave a mental snort, deciding he was no longer a part of Akatsuki. Now, he did as Shiroi Sama told him. The previous person had short, dark blue hair that was spiky and blue skin. On the sides of his face were gills. Small triangular pointed teeth similar to that of a short. His face seemed permanently etched with a smile, accompanied by small, beady eyes. On his back rested an enormous scabbard weapon, and like Itachi, he too wore the robes of Akatsuki. Kisame inquired, why are you back so soon, Itachi? With interest. Just as Itachi was about to tell him to stay out of his affairs, his master's words resounded in his ears. Go spy on the Akatsuki on my behalf. Behaving in your typical manner. Proceed, servant. Itachi complied as usual, keeping that order in mind. He said, mentally glaring at Kisame, I underestimated the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and his team. And that cost me. Shaking his head, Kisame said, oh well. A bit sooner than expected, but I guess I'll have to give it a turn. He then closed his eyes and gestured with one hand. Itachi scowled. It would be so simple to strangle Kisame by wringing his neck. However, this was not what his master had instructed him to do. He will, therefore, hold his peace until his master gives him the order to covertly murder more Akatsuki members. He will gladly carry out that task in order to appease his boss. Hidan is quoted as saying, Hail Shiroi, Sama, and Naruto. Sama. The Uchiha exclaimed in her head. Shiroi, Kakashi, Naruto, and Chio make up the team. Including Chachizero, stopped in front of a big rock that was obstructing their path to the cave, which was their primary goal. Glancing at the seal with his Sharingan, Kakashi remarked idly, looks like they have a Fuin Jutsu sealing off the cave. You're right, Chio replied. Although I'm not a seal expert, this is one of the best executed seals I've ever seen, the elder said. With a grunt, Naruto fixed his intense gaze on the seal. That is a barrier with 5 seals. Thank goodness Ero Sensei thought it would be a good idea to teach me Fuin Jutsu while we were traveling. Thought the blonde. The Sannin decided that teaching the blonde Fuin Jutsu would be a great idea while on their training journey with Jiraiya. At first, the blonde didn't understand the purpose of it. But the blonde adapted to Fuin Jutsu like a fish to water, not long after the Sannin had explained its benefits. To be honest, Naruto had no idea he was so skilled at Fuin Jutsu. Since everyone had told him that mastering the art of seals was difficult, he had honestly assumed that the art would be far too difficult for him. However, for some reason, he never had that issue in the first place. Naruto finally understood when Jiraiya explained that Fuin Jutsu ran in his family. The Uzumaki clan possessed extensive knowledge of seal art. Because of their skill at sealing, Iwa and Kumo feared the Uzumaki clan because they were so knowledgeable in the craft. Naruto wanted to slam his head against the wall when he realized how knowledgeable his clan was about seals. He belonged to the Uzumaki family. He would be a master at sealing, of course. It surprised him that he had forgotten that. Evidently, he had been far too preoccupied to consider trying out seals at all. In any case, the blonde was pleased to declare that he was a master apprentice in sealing, all under Jiraiya's careful observation and instruction. Essentially a master sealer with little left to learn. Jiraiya predicted that he would become a grand master of sealing once he attained level 10. At level 9, Naruto was a master apprentice. Naruto stepped up to the seal and said, "I can get the seal off without any repercussions they may have added." But before he could approach the seal any farther, a sizable chakra signature appeared. Before anyone could even duck out of the way, a big figure plunged into the water below them. When the water eventually returned to the river, revealing Kisami's sly figure, Naruto growled, well, if it isn't the little Gaki. "Long time no see, huh? Gaki? And you have the copy. Nin as well? What happened to Jiraiya of the Sannin brat?" Kisame grinned broadly as he looked at the blonde's figure. "Well, you've grown up, so I guess I can't call you a brat anymore. But what the heck is up with that doll on your head?" Kisame asked, glancing at the doll that was wearing a heart-eyed expression on his sword. Why did he feel like running like his ass was on fire and taking Samahata all of a sudden? "Hoshigaki. Kisame," Naruto said, lightly touching Altair. When Naruto gestured for Kakashi to stand down, Kakashi stopped trying to take a kunai out of his pouch. Shio stiffened, giving the shark a manly glare. At the man's appearance, Shiroi just arched an eyebrow. What would happen if she ended up catching that guy while fishing? Did it imply that she could prepare him? For some reason, Kisame shivered. With a focused gaze, the shark man steadied the blonde's sword. How come that sword looked so known? Hold on. Pummel like an eagle. The guard's eagle wings. A black leather sheath and handle made of the same material. His eyes grew slightly wide with insight. With a hint of surprise, he murmured, "Gaki. Do you know what you're wielding?" He demanded. "Yeah, I know what I'm wielding, Kisame." "San." The blonde shot up an eyebrow in response. Chio and Kakashi exchanged a questioning look. Kisame gave the sword a bewildered glance before a broad smile spread across his features. "Well, I'll admit. I had not anticipated running into the renowned Altair." Pointing his finger at the blonde, Kisame remarked, "I hope you know how to use that sword, Gaki, because I challenge you to a duel. Not using jutsu. Not any elaborate ninja methods. Simply put, swordsmanship. Gaki, what say you?" With a maniacal grin, Kisame roared. If his calculations were accurate, then the extract of the Ichibi will need at least one more day. But here they were. They could easily just team up against Kisame, take him down, and rescue Gaara with enough time to party. Naruto blinked in surprise before glancing at the others behind. Could he afford to waste such time? Therefore, why was it so hard for him to reject Kisami's challenge? "Pride Kid is the reason for the answer," Kyubi replied. "What do you mean, Kyubi?" "Before. I used to question Arashi a lot when he was still alive about why, in matters of swordsmanship, his pride got in the way of his abilities. His response was always the same: many warriors are becoming so dependent on jutsu that other arts are being neglected as a result. I understand that in the future, true masters of kenjutsu will be hard to come by and that the art form will be practically forgotten. The explanation for my intense pride in my swordsmanship. It's because I want to demonstrate that Kenjutsu is just as strong as ninjutsu, Kyuubi answered. So what's the reason? Indeed. Pride in your swordplay is currently being questioned. The blonde gripped tighter on Altair's handle, wondering what to do. He knew Kisame was only attempting to buy more time for the Akatsuki to extract the Ichibi, but his pride and honor as a swordsman were being called into question. He had fallen in love with the art of Kenjutsu during his training. He enjoyed Kenjutsu more than Fuinjutsu or even ninjutsu because of its fluid movements and the elegant dance. Like battle, it allows you to witness and experience. To him, Kenjutsu was an art that could never be perfected because it never ends, and that, no matter how strong you became, there would always be someone stronger than you in the art. What then ought he to do? The blonde felt a hand on his shoulder and looked to his right, only to see Shiroi's face inches from his own. The white-haired girl looked into his pink-colored eyes, which were blue. She smirked, kissed him deeply, and nodded her head in Kisami's direction, silently telling him to kick his ass already. Naruto. Taicho. When the blonde turned to face Kakashi, he was met with a cheeky thumbs up from the silver gray-haired Jonin, and a slight nod from Chio. Excitement rattled Altair. Reaching behind her, Shachizero produced a sign that said, "Go Naruto." Chama. The doll was dancing on Shiroi's head while holding the sign in her hands. A little tick appeared on the girl's head. Everyone, the blonde said, turning to face Kisame, who gave a slight second look at what he saw. An asteroid figure stood behind Kisame, and it cleared up slightly to reveal a man. He wore a midnight black mesh shirt, black pants with red streaks licking the bottom of the pants, and armor plating made of a variety of black plates over the shirt, similar to the armor of Tobirama, Hashirama, and Madara, only in black. There was a symbol on the front of the chest armor plating, which was an eagle screeching with two blades crossing behind it. His hair was similar to Madara's, but more wild. He had long, ankle-length red hair that was spiked in almost every direction, partially covering his left face. His eyes were blue, tinged green, and a red sash held an empty sheath at his waist. Before vanishing, the unidentified man winked and grinned broadly at the blonde. Who the heck was that? Who was it that was? Kyuubi inquired, raising an eyebrow in response to the blonde's query. It's nothing, answered the blonde. After inhaling deeply, he glared at Kisame, saying, Hoshigaki Kisame. He said, I, Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, accepts your challenge. He knows? Kakashi choked on his own spit. Chio looked at the blonde as if he had just announced that he was a Biju in a transformation jutsu. Namikaze. She thought incredulously. Kisami's smile almost split his features. Excellent. Come on, Gaki, let's do this. You are eligible to move first. Finally, someone who can outshine him in swordplay. Someone to challenge him. He roared excitedly. In an attempt to divide the man who resembled a shark, the blonde quickly drew Altair and blurred in front of Kisami's excited form. Was that the quick draw technique? Kisame asked, smiling briefly before instantly holding Samahata in front of him to absorb the full force of the blonde's quick draw. Amazing, Gaki. That move is unknown even to most samurai. Kisame exclaimed with delight. The blonde narrowed his eyes and threw more force into the encounter. Kisame clenched his jaw and pushed the blonde back a little with his incredible strength. The blonde Jinchuriki narrowed his eyes, then shot his blade into Kisami's stomach by diving under the Samahata. Kisame laughed again, then flicked the Samahata's handle, making it collide with Altair's steel once more. The blonde pulled his blade back and attempted a horizontal swing, but Kisame counter spun quickly, forcing the two to look into each other's eyes before they both leapt back. The two swordsmen engaged in a fierce and intense battle of the blades, running in a circle around each other before meeting in the middle once more. Altair and the Samahata engaged in combat, each of their blades unleashing a deadly intent, vowing to honor their respective masters. For more than a century, there had been people who thought they could claim Altair, but they were never deserving of him. Their motivations were only self-interest and prestige. Altair fought to help his master fulfill his dreams. And now, at last, after centuries of waiting, a deserving wielder had shown up. This one would not let its present master down. Samahata was fighting only for the sake of fighting. Its whole history is based on betrayal and bloodshed. It has had over dozens of wielders, all of them more violent and bloodthirsty than the last. It was created with the express purpose of causing death and destruction, and nothing could stop it from producing more of it. It was a sentient blade, and after so many endless battles, the wielder's personal effects started to affect even the blade itself. It was made only for death and destruction, and as long as it could fight, that was all that mattered. As long as it could enjoy the thrill of more fights in the future, that's as long as it was more than happy to fight alongside its current wielder. The two blades slamming together as if they could hear each other's thoughts caused a loud grinding sound that echoed throughout the clearing. The astrophysical representations of a silver eagle with a black beak, resolute yellow eyes, and a tuft of black fur on its chest materialized above Kisame and Naruto. A large blue shark with black beady eyes glinted with a gleeful gleam as it eyed the eagle in front of Kisame. The shark's scales were the same color as Kisame's hair. The big shark let out a roar of its own in response to the eagle's screams. Kisame laughed heartily as he kept slicing the blonde in front of him. Fun. It was so much fun. He hadn't had this much fun since, well, forever. The excitement in the blonde's eyes made his blood boil with anticipation. He never imagined he would meet such a powerful swordsman. As a matter of fact, the 7 ninja swordsmen would have treasured this blonde if he had been born in Kiri. Perhaps he would never have joined the Akatsuki if he had known someone like this blonde sooner. Perhaps he would never have gone rouge if he had known this blonde prior to killing his allies. But that was in the past, and now all he wanted was to relish every moment of this fight. When the two swordsmen came to a standstill in the middle of the river, Kisame's face was a shit. Iter and Naruto's eyes were cold with determination. He was going to win, for Gaara. With Altair aimed in front of him, the blonde broke the deadlock by jumping over Kisame, using Samahata as a stepping stone, and lunging down toward the man with the blue skin like a missile, with the blade striking Kisame before his own body touched the ground. But Kisame showed himself to be a great shinobi when he dove back to deflect the blonde's missile. Like attack, which came out of the water and hit Kisame with a barrage of vertical slashes and horizontal swings. But the blue-haired man countered those, using Samahata's massive form to execute a devastating downward vertical swing. The blonde blocked Kisame's attack, but the water behind him wasn't so fortunate. The attack's sheer force caused the water to ripple and scatter. But Kisame wasn't done attacking. The blonde coughed lightly and then gave Kisame a small smirk as the shark like man planted his foot in her stomach. Kisame raised an eyebrow, but his eyes widened as the blonde grabbed Samahata's scales with his bare hands. Altair was the silver blade that he aimed directly at Kisame's head. Kisame barely managed to get his head out of the way, but he managed to do so, and he sprang away from the blonde, yanking Samahata from her hold in the process. Not too bad, Gaki. Not bad at all, he remarked as a long, thin cut started to show on his cheek. I wish we could put an end to our Gaki fight. Sheathing Samahata on his back, Kisame uttered, but unfortunately, we can't. Everyone, including Naruto, raised an eyebrow. Why is that? The blonde inquired. Gaki, let's be honest. You're withholding something. I'm restraining myself. You're rushing to save Gaara, and even though I wanted to, I was unable to use all of my power. Given that this isn't my actual body, the person with blue skin stated. So you're using the same jutsu that Itachi was using? The blonde said, narrowing his eyes. Yes, Kisame replied. Don't you think it would be better? We would not have engaged in this pansy-ass fight we just had if we had fought at full strength. Would you not want to put yourself to the test against me? At maximum power? The next time we fight Gaki. The shark. Like man grinned ferociously at the blonde after failing to get an answer. We're going to fight to the death. Jutsu included. After saying that, the S-rank shinobi's body started to fade and a completely new one appeared in his place before collapsing into a pile. The blonde studied the body for a few moments before he motioned with a single hand for the others to gather around. The others obeyed with haste, and the blonde moved quickly in the direction of the seal on the boulder. Shiroi-chan, as soon as I break this seal, I need you to smash this boulder. When that occurs, I'll charge in, free Gaara from whatever hold they have on him, and I'll need your two bodies to provide cover, Kakashi. Senpei and Chio. Oba. For Shiroi. Chan and myself as well, the blonde said. Group members nodded silently, and Chachizero found herself at one of her favorite spots on the planet, atop Naruto's head. The blonde put his hood back on, having taken it off during the battle, and looked at the seal in front of him. The blonde Jinchuriki spun in a counterclockwise direction while placing his hands on the seal. Sealing technique. Shadow key of all seals. Cried the blonde. A vast array of shadow. Like hands spread out and started to converge upon the seal as he spoke that sentience. The seal turned black and was simply consumed by the shadow hands. The shadow key of all seals, which could literally work on almost any seal, almost being the operative word, was Naruto's favorite of all the sealing techniques he was aware of. As a test run, he attempted the technique on the Shikifuin, but it was unsuccessful because his father had added multiple security precautions to the seal. He learned his lesson: don't tamper with his father's seals, after receiving a 200-volt shock for an entire minute. Anyhow, the blonde jumped back just in time to see Shiroi smash the boulder into millions of pieces with a single blow after breaking the seal on it. Chio remained by Shiroi's side, but the blonde wasted no time in charging headlong into the cave with Kakashi's help. The blonde and Kakashi returned moments later, with Gaara still very much alive but unconscious, and cradled in the blonde's arms. And the group glared into each and every Akatsuki member's eye. Chapter end. I feel like giving you guys a sneak peek at what's coming up next, so check out this completely unrelated teaser. Where am I at this moment? The man with white hair gruffly spoke as he surveyed the completely white room, his red eyes serving it several more times before his stern, impassive gaze fell on a man who resembled Uchiha Madara in that he had long, spiky red hair that reached his ankles, and a blonde who had sapphire blue eyes and golden yellow hair, as well as whisker marks on his cheeks. Who are the two of you? He made a demand. N. No way. I. That's not possible. Why? Do you want me to take him on? Naruto exclaimed, shocked. You're correct, Naruto. Chan. He is the one who will put you to the test to see if you are worthy of my armor. Pointing to the white-haired man next to him, the red-haired man said with joy. His fiery red eyes glared at the man with red hair in front of him, saying, what insolence. I expect an answer to the question I pose. Tell me now. Why am I not currently imprisoned within the Shinigami's stomach? And who exactly is this newcomer next to you? With a sharp glare in their direction, the white-haired man questioned. Me. Are you not asking a lot of questions, Tobirama? Chan? In response to Tobirama's indignation over the last part of his name, the redhead said, this is Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto of the Uzumaki clan. Salute. He concluded with a smile. I see. So you're from the clan of Mito, huh? It's good to meet you. Senju Tobirama, Naidame Hokage, is who I am. Though, based on your expression, it appears that you already know that. A few minutes ago, involving the Akatsuki. While they continued to seal the Ichibi, the whole Akatsuki remained silent. They only needed one more day to finish the sealing, having already invested at least 2 days in it. But one of the S-ranked offenders was starting to act twitchy. Hidan is that someone. The Jushinist's partner, who was standing next to him, was getting irritated as his fingers started to twitch at odd intervals. Kakuzu glared at his partner and said, Hidan, if you don't stop that infernal twitching, I'll kill you. Fuck you, Kakuzu. It's not my fault, Jashin. Sama decided to punish me because I haven't given him his daily sacrifices. Hidan yelled, so don't patronize me. Heathen. The other Akatsuki members glared at the Jushinist, telling him to shut the fuck up. I'm trying to stay focused. Hidan, however, ignored all of that and scowled at the other Akatsuki members. What are you motherfuckers gonna do about it? Exactly. You can do shit. He yelled. Pain started, Hidan, enough. But Hidan cut him off. With a malicious smile covering his face, the Jushinist exclaimed, silence heathen. You will all one day bow to Jashin. Sama. Jashin. Sama will take your souls, and it is he who will decide if you are worthy of basking in his great presence. The rest of Akatsuki's members all started to perspire. They were aware that this would occur. Hidan would always act in this way when he was bored. Still, they were more curious about their leader's reaction to this. Pain's overwhelming presence filled the room, as if on cue. His eyes narrowed dangerously at Hidan, due to Pain. Pain almost whispered, his voice laced with deadly intent, "Are you quite finished now? If so, then detest your foolish speeches about your god for another time. Otherwise, I'll rip your very soul from your body. Am I clear?" The others began to perspire, apart from Sasori, who was acting as a puppet, and Kisame, who was interacting with Naruto's team, and once more. Pain made sure everyone knew why he was the leader. But Hidan shuddered when Pain threatened to take away his soul. When did he last enrage the man with the ring eye? It was definitely not pleasant to have your soul torn from your body and then forcibly pushed back in. Pain was once more interrupted when Kisame appeared and disappeared on one of the fingers of the Gedo Mazo statue. Now then. It's time to get back on track. Kisame is buying us the time we need in order to fully seal the Ichibi. Now get back to war. As everyone saw Kisame's form, they all blinked. Sasori asked slowly, his tone shifting from blank to slightly angry. Kisame. Weren't you supposed to be distracting the Konoha team? Kisame lied and shrugged, saying, "Hey, I tried, not my fault, I underestimated the brat." He could not possibly be telling them that he had left the Konoha team on their own. Itachi glared at Kisame, Naruto. Sama was a brat, and Kisame got it. That motherfucker with the fish face should feel honored to be facing Naruto. Sama. Kisame's response was met with a boulder that blocked the cave entrance to the outside world before Pain could respond. Was abruptly shattered into hundreds or even thousands of tiny fragments. The shards fluttered all around them, but the Akatsuki members did not react to them because they were only astral projections. But since Deidara and Sasori were real people and not just astral projections, they were not quite so safe. The blonde Akatsuki member swore and shielded his face from some shards with his one remaining arm. Sasori, however, only needed to deflect them all with his tail. The Cage's floating form was seized by a gray blur that darted into the cave and swiftly fled into the cloud of smoke before any of the infamous members of Akatsuki could blink. Pain glared into the slowly vanishing smoke, along with the other S. Ranked missing. Nin. A few more moments passed before the smoke finally cleared. And the Konoha team sent to retrieve the Cage was met with glaring eyes from the S. Ranked criminals. Sasori gave his grandmother a particular glare, but his grandmother continued to fix her aging scowl on her grandson's figure. Deidara just gave them a glare while sporting a tiny smile. He was eager to see how much they would enjoy his artwork. Itachi resisted the impulse to just drop to his knees and give a simple bow to Shiroi and Naruto. He was not even deserving of being among them. Not to mention stand in it. Kisame, meanwhile, just grinned slightly at the blonde Jinchuriki. He wished he could be there now. With a menacing smile, Hidan considered which to present to Jashin. Sama. The idea made him lick his own lips. At times, it was just as enjoyable as fucking people. Hidan's, not my, words. In the meantime, Pain gave the blonde Jinchuriki a fierce look. Naruto did not take his eyes off Pain. His azure eyes peered into the man's ringed purple eyes. He was clueless as to why. However, he sensed a connection to the odd-eyed man. Even though Pain's whole body was covered in black, his eyes were the only feature that stood out in the slightest. The blonde was unsure of this man's identity, but one thing was certain. He posed a threat. Meanwhile, Kyuubi's eyes had widened in shock inside the seal as he saw the world through Naruto's eyes. Impossible. The Rinnegan? He said quietly, But how? Those eyes are only supposed to be created from a unity between a Senju and Uchiha. Could it be that an Uchiha had a relationship with an Uzumaki? Kyuubi speculated. In the end, it would be the most logical choice. Regardless of their friendship, Senju and Uchiha harbored a deep hatred for one another. The Senju clan and the Uzumaki clan were not to be confused. The Uzumaki clan was a dangerous but generally peaceful clan. Might it be that? Did an Uzumaki and a Uchiha have a covert liaison? Or is it possible that Uchiha and a Senju had a covert relationship? If either of those statements holds true, then The outcome of that affair was the man who was now in front of them. Kakashi scowled at the Akatsuki members. He had no fear at all, even though he might be up against this organization's might. He was a long-time resident. And that's why he had so many failures. He could rarely follow through on the commitments he had made during that life. And all he wanted was to pass away and meet his mistakes' victims. But he would not pass away here. One promise remained for him to fulfill. A long-gone pledge he made to himself. A vow he'd almost forgotten. He made a self-promise to use all of his strength to defend Naruto. And he intended to carry it out. Even if it meant that he would die. Chio gave her grandson a fierce look. There are no words to express how she was feeling right now. Her only emotions were pride and disappointment. Pride in Sasori's advancements and dissatisfaction in his transformation were felt. Shiroi glared coldly and harshly at each and every Akatsuki member. Did these men really intend to steal Naruto from her? The thought almost made her snort. She could tell by looking directly into their eyes that each of them had experienced some kind of hardship in life. She idly attempted to enter their minds, but to her dismay, she found that they appeared to be protected mentally from her. What a shame. Her true desire was for additional slaves. With an unsettling grin, Chachizuru gazed into their eyes as the small doll naively met theirs. Her mind was constantly racing with ideas on how to murder them and what their blood would look like if she sliced them open. Silently giggling, the small doll's hand crept toward the knives she had stashed inside her skirts. For several more minutes, the entire group of shinobi, along with Shiroi and Chachizuru, scowled at one another. Well, look at these fuckers. Thinking they can bust up in here and take us on. Huh. I will offer all of you to Jashin Sama. When this is all over, exclaimed the Jashinist with delight before Hidan broke the silence. Angrily, Shiroi twitched, a fucking Jashinist. How the hell about it? Why did I have to encounter one more of these unstoppable jerks? She got angry in her head. Yes, she recalled her encounter with the Jashinist for the first time. The bastard would not stop talking about sacrificing her to a masochistic god. She ripped the man's head off because she was tired of his incessant chatter. To discover him still speaking. She tried drowning the man because that infuriated her. And the bastard was still alive, 4 hours later. If there was anything in the world that she genuinely detested. A fucking Jashinist, that is. The mom. Fools. Just. Would not. Perish. And she gets really irritated about that. When this fucking Jashinist is defeated by her. She was going to relish murdering him in the gory and bloody way she could come up with. He was going to be nothing more than a bloodstain on the fucking ground by the time she was through with him. Shiroi scowled menacingly in his direction, her eyes turning a deep scarlet. She genuinely detested Jashinists. Did she say she detested Jashinists? Kakuzu gave his teammate an agitated glare and said, Hidan. Shut up. We can't even fight them if we wanted to. The reaction from the Jashinists was, fuck you, Kakuzu. Enough. Pain commanded, keeping his gaze fixed on the fair-haired Jinchuriki. The other Akatsuki members all straightened at the man's command, as Naruto's group observed. And they all believed he was the group's leader. It appears you were able to save the young Cage. I do not care that you're here to save the Cage. I do not care that you are glaring down at us. I do not care that you are looking at us with contempt. What I do care about, however, is that there are not one, but two Jinchuriki within our reach. Pain said with an icy expression. Sasori, Deidara. Reclaim the Ichibi Jinchuriki. Also retrieve the Kyuubi Jinchuriki if possible. Pain instructed, the rest of you will continue on with your own assignments. Understood? One by one, the others began to nod as well. Their spacecraft outshrouded themselves. Naruto yelled, wait. And both Pain and his group turned to look at him. The commander made no noise at all, merely glancing down at the blonde. The ring-eyed leader of Akatsuki chose to give in to his own curiosity and glared blankly into the blonde's eyes. With a chilly glare on his face, Naruto asked, staring into Pain's eyes, "Why are you doing this? What is Akatsuki's purpose? And who are you?" Pain just gave Blonde a long, glaring stare. He contemplated whether to give in to the blonde's curiosity or just walk away and let Sasori and Deidara handle things. Following a few more exchanges of ideas, the leader of the ranked offenders finally spoke. "You ask why we are doing this? The answer is quite simple. We are doing this for peace. You ask what is Akatsuki's purpose? That purpose is to retrieve the 9 Biju. You ask who am I? I shall tell you. I am Pain, the leader of Akatsuki. There will come a time, Jinchuriki, when we will meet face to face. And when that does happen, prepare yourself for that moment, for that meeting will end in your capture. Provided that Sasori and Deidara capture here and now," Pain said, looking at the blonde one final time, before disappearing with him. Kyuubi tensed up a little. There are only 2 possible explanations for why someone would try to assemble the 9 Biju. To be able to command them. Or to resurrect. Kyuubi wished his second presumption was incorrect. Given that if then the entire planet would burn to ash and nothing more. Still staring into his grandmother's eyes, Sasori stated coldly, "Deidara, you heard leader Sama. We must, and we will reclaim the Ichibi Jinchuriki. So prepare yourself. Don't worry, Sasori. Donna. The Jinchuriki won't escape. And these Konoha nin will face the wrath of my art." Deidara exclaimed with delight, flashing a small smirk. With a frustrated glance at his partner, Sasori said, "Deidara, I've already told you. Your so-called art is nothing compared to my vision of art. True art is eternal and everlasting. And I've told you, Sasori. Donna. True art is but a moment. Before it disappears via explosion." Deidara countered. With a snort, Sasori posed the hypothetical question, what is the point of art, if it only lasts a single moment? Deidara was about to respond to Sasori's query when he was abruptly forced to turn to the right. A massive beam of blood-red energy blasted through the walls behind the 2 ranked criminals, passing right by him at the perfect moment. Sasori and Deidara both gulped and turned to look behind them. Only to watch as the debris that had once covered the cave walls behind them was gradually reduced to ashes and nothing more. With deliberate slowness, both Akatsuki members turned to face the group assigned to save Gaara. Only to discover the white-haired girl standing next to the blonde Jinchuriki, holding out her hand. Her hands had a faint red tint that vanished as she gave the 2 a fierce look. Chiyo and Kakashi gazed at Shiroi with wide eyes. They found it hard to believe. It was simply not feasible. Kakashi was somewhat aware of Shiroi's skills. Jiraiya had, after all, pulled him aside for a brief explanation of her powers. Furthermore, Kakashi was aware that her telepathic abilities were nearly identical to those of the Yamanaka clan. But this? Jiraiya had never brought this up before. She had either never used it around Jiraiya or had never disclosed it at all. But based on Naruto's unsurprised expression, he was thinking that she had never told Jiraiya that. Deidara exclaimed, glancing fearfully at the wall behind him, "The fuck was that?" Sasori would have swallowed if he could have. Rather, he contented himself to stare vacantly at the devastation in front of him. No time for questions, Chiyo shook her head gently. They had work to do, and Kami was going to see it through to the end. Chachizero laughed a little. Her master appears to be growing irritated with those 2. Shiroi let her hand drop slowly, a little disappointed that her first blow had gone unnoticed. She was simply growing irritated with those 2. She was getting dangerously impatient. All she wanted to do was save Gaara? Was it? Take it easy on those 2. Locate a peaceful, quiet area. And then use the cowgirl position to fuck the shit out of her fiancé. Was that asking for too much? It seems that it was. Naruto focused only on Gaara's unconscious form, oblivious to everything else that was going on. That the redhead was okay gave him relief. That didn't, however, lessen his concern. As all of this was going on, inside the seal, Kyuubi, who had finally been startled into silence, turned to face the redhead that Naruto was holding. The Kyuubi stared at the redhead in blankness before closing his eyes and allowing his thoughts to be taken to a place that was only accessible to the Baiju and their chosen. Shukaku. You look like hammered shit. Kyuubi glared at his brother, a sneer on his face. With a feeble groan, Shukaku said, "Fuck you, Kurama." The Ichibi responded with equal weakness. Taking deep, raspy breaths slowly. Kurama's eyes grew slightly softer before a hard, irate glare replaced them. So you got your ass kicked around, and you were captured by a human no less. And you call yourself a Biju? How pathetic. The Kyuubi grumbled. The Ichibi gave his brother a weak glare and moaned pitifully, "Did you come here to insult me? If so, then just leave me be, Kurama. Some brother you are." Kurama continued to glare at his brother for a few more seconds, prior to the red chakra starting to seep out of him. And the chakra traveled to the weaker version of Shukaku, where it then restored Shukaku to health. Shukaku asked, looking at his brother with a shocked expression on his face. What are you doing?" Gradually feeling his strength return. Kurama said sloppily, "What does it look like?" "I'm lending you some chakra." When Shukaku heard this, he blinked in shock. He trailed off, saying, "But why? Don't tell me you actually care?" The Kyuubi would be visible from a mile away blushing if his fur weren't orange in color. Don't misunderstand. I don't see. Care about you, or any of the others. I have to protect my image, damn it. How would I be able to call myself king of the Biju if I can't even help my subjects?" He yelled with shame, seeking to preserve his standing with his sibling. Though he still felt a little too weak to really try to argue with his brother, Shukaku laughed a little. "Head down," he said, yeah. Just let me know when you're done." Kurama said, "Shukakau. Why aren't you? You know." Shukaku gave his eyes a small roll. Shukaku said, "Matter of factly," before closing his eyes, "when the Akatsuki were sealing me, they tried to also seal my conscience. However, I was able to escape from the priest bastard that sealed himself in me. Because of that, the bastard was sealed into that statue, instead of me getting ready for a much needed nap." A brief period of comfortable silence was followed by Shukaku's sleep-drenched voice as he spoke. He closed his eyes and fell asleep, saying, "Kurama. Thank you. Sama." Ichibi was tired and needed to rest. If he had stayed awake any longer, he would have heard Kurama murmur, "Sure. Anything for family." The blonde set Gaara back down on the ground slowly, outside the seal. He silently made 5 clones and gave the order, "Take Gaara somewhere safe, and protect him." Gaara's unconscious form was soon picked up by the clones, who then vanished into the trees in the background. The blonde member of Akatsuki smirked at Deidara's actions and said, "Hey Sasori. Donna. I'll take the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and Sharingan no Kakashi. You can have the girls." While grabbing a few of his clay arts. "Katsu." He yelled before hurling them into the cave ceilings above them, smashing the ceilings. "Hey Cyclops. Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Catch me if you can." Deidara mocked as he took off on his bird made of clay. Naruto looked at his fiancée and said, "Shiroi-chan. Can you handle everything here?" With a small smirk on her lips, Shiroi waved him off and said, "I'll be fine, it's time I get back into fighting anyway. To be honest, I feel a little out of practice. This is the perfect opportunity to let loose a little. Chikazero, you stay, I'll most likely need your unique talents while fighting this man." She continued. "Of course, Shiroi. Chama." Chachizero exclaimed, jumping on the white-haired girl's head with excitement. After blinking for a few seconds, Sasori gave a small shake of his head in shock. With an innocent expression on her face, she said, "Nay Naruto. Chama. Can you bring me back a present when you kill that other blonde?" After blinking, Naruto nodded slowly. The doll chirped, "Thank you," before turning to face Sasori. With a silent nod, Naruto turned to face Kakashi, and the two Jonin started pursuing the blonde member of Akatsuki. Sasori said, coldly, "Are you done with your useless talk? I'm getting tired of waiting." He then glared at the three females, including Chachizero. With a small shake of her head, Chio said, "You are always impatient, Sasori." Her tone was disapproving. If he had the option, Sasori would have rolled his eyes and replied, "And I see you're still giving lectures that I do not care for." Chio Obaa. San. Raising an elegant eyebrow, Shiroi whispered, "Chio. Oba. San," glancing at the older woman. When Chio opened her eyes to glare at her grandson, she said, "I guess there is no avoiding this topic. Sasori is my grandson." She yelled, her voice firm and determined, "and the reason why he is like this is partially my fault. So I shall take responsibility for my grandson's crimes." With a hint of conceit in his voice, Sasori snorted with laughter and said, "Please. I have long since surpassed you in strength, Oba. San. And you are way past your prime. You couldn't hope to defeat me, even with your strongest technique. The puppet master of the Akatsuki. I always told you that arrogance would lead to your downfall. And it seems you have not taken my teachings to heart," exclaimed the elder, to which Chio shook her head reproachfully. "Shiroi. Chan. Prepare yourself. I know Sasori better than anyone, and I know all of his creation's weaknesses." Shiroi gave the older woman a scowl. She growled, glaring at the older woman and threatening to kill her if she refused to listen. "Listen here. You old hag. Don't ever call me Shiroi Chan again," she growled. With a slight swallow, Chio silently nodded to the girl with white hair. Sasori yelled, "Enough with the words," as his enormous, bladed tail shot out from under his cloak and struck the three females. Chio quickly sidestepped as Shiroi narrowed her pink, slitted eyes. The girl with white hair ignored the mental tail for a moment before slanting her body slightly to the right. The bladed tail narrowly missed her completely by 1 inch. Chio's mouth dropped slightly as her eyes grew wide with shock. Sasori's eyes narrowed, bewildered. He was certain that blow was going to strike her in the chest. Thus, why? What caused it to miss? He saw it when he squinted his eyes even more. A few seconds ago, her body was barely an inch from where she was standing. This indicates that either the girl moved very slightly during their conversation, or alternatively, the girl moved so quickly that he was unable to see her dodge and return to her original position. That was a very unsettling idea. However, the Akatsuki puppet master continued to have faith in his ability to defeat both the girl and his grandmother. He just needed to exercise patience. Something that he hated with all his heart. Shiroi said, "Chachizero, you know what to do." The doll let out a menacing giggle as Chachizero smiled menacingly. The doll leapt on top of Sasori's sharp tail and exclaimed, "Right, Shiroi." Chama. The doll glowed a little as she placed her tiny hands on the tail's surface, and then she smiled. With a blink, Sasori pulled his tail back, idly wondering what the purpose of that was. Somehow, sensing Sasori's perplexity, Shiroi spoke. "I'm sure you're wondering what the purpose of all that was," she said, capturing Sasori and Chio's interest. "You see, when I created Chachizero, I made sure to give her various abilities involving combat methods of her choosing." The blonde laughed broadly. She ended up choosing abilities related to bladed weapons. One of her abilities was Chachizero's entire right arm then changed, becoming a perfect duplicate of Sasori's tail that was covered in blades. With a sinister, sly smile, Shiroi concluded, "The ability to copy any weapon she touches." At that, Chio's eyes grew wide. In their day, such a skill would have been highly prized and possibly even sought after. Sasori swore. Why was this wonderful doll his problem? Shiroi's blood. Red eyes glared at the man, and she gave Sasori a sinister smile. With a deranged smile, she asked thoughtfully, "Now then, where were we?" If Sasori himself weren't a puppet. Though he would have been shivering, he felt nothing but a slight rattling of his body because the man was a puppet. He blinked in bewilderment. With no such advantage, Chio shivered noticeably before she stilled. And the hard look deepened in her eyes. What about Chachizero? If there was a prize for having the biggest smile in the world, that is. Then Chachizero would get the prize right away. As he and Kakashi pursued Deidara through the forest, Naruto let out a low growl. They had to chase the conceited bastard out of the forest for the last few minutes. And it was growing boring. Really. Extremely fast. It appeared that Kakashi concurred with the blonde as well. If his scowl at the fair-haired Akatsuki member was any indication, Naruto was unaware of Kakashi's intense desire to slit Akatsuki's throat after that bombing. The blonde ranked criminal clearly had a plan for where she was taking them. And according to Shinobi's historical background, for a variety of reasons, they have always escaped to a different location. 1. To trick them into falling into a trap that their friends have laid. Which, in Kakashi's opinion, was quite unlikely. 2. They were running into a region whose topography would suit their style of fighting. Or 3. They were simply sprinting like a bunch of pips. Kakashi knew that the blonde wasn't the kind to simply flee a fight based on what he was able to learn from this Deidara. Thus, the query was, how could the blonde be doing this? It was a question for which Kakashi had no response. Kakashi said, attracting the hooded blonde's attention, Naruto. Glancing at his former pupil, the Jonin in Embu armor questioned, you do realize that guy is leading us into a trap, right? With his blank face fixed on the blonde riding the white bird, Naruto answered, I know. He did not even glance at Kakashi. With a questioning gaze at his former pupil, the silver-haired Jonin said, then, why are we still chasing him? It took the blonde Jinchuriki a few moments to respond. Rather, he continued to stare blankly at the other blonde who was currently smirking tauntingly at them. Call it curiosity. But I'm curious as to what he will do, Kakashi. Senpai. He said. The former Anbu captain worriedly questioned, isn't that a bit arrogant? Worried that his old pupil was growing haughty. If that was the case, he would have to figure out how to return Naruto to the real world. After a few moments of staring, the blonde let out a sigh. He trailed off abruptly, his eyes glazing over a little. Very well then. If you feel so strongly about. Kakashi put his hand on the blonde's shoulder, concerned. Naruto? He asked dutifully. The blonde shook his head a moment later. After gaining his bearings, he replied, one of my clones just dispelled. The blonde shot Kakashi a menacing look. A mile from here, my clones have hid Gaara in the largest tree they could find. Several of them are as of this moment patrolling the area. Clones are only good for 3, maybe 4 hits before they dispel. He took a break. Putting an end to the blonde's speech, Kakashi said, you want me to go and protect Gaara? With no words, Naruto nodded. Kakashi questioned, showing a lot of concern for Naruto at the moment. But what about that guy? You don't plan on facing him alone, do you? The Jonin's concern would have touched the blonde if the circumstances had been different. But this was no time to discuss. This was an opportunity to take out an Akatsuki member and protect Gaara. Talking was not an option at this point. Action was required. Naruto finally turned to face his former teacher and said, listen, Kakashi. Senpai. You have to trust me on this. The mission is to ensure Gaara is safe. And I just don't have faith that my clones will be able to protect Gaara should a competent shinobi make their appearance. That's when Kakashi caught sight of it. He recognized the soul-piercing blue in one eye all too well. The other, however, was a colorless crimson. Is that the Kyuubi's influence? No. Typically, there is a pupil slit. But there isn't even a slit there. Just. What is this? The Jonin pondered. Before the adult with silver hair could consider this odd development, Naruto's left eye went back to being the same shade of blue. The student coming back. It seemed that the blonde was unaware of this. After blinking, Kakashi fixed his intense gaze on the blonde's eyes, searching for anything that might be affecting him. He was certain that the blonde had not been struck by a genjutsu and that it was not the Kyuubi. Then why was his left eye acting so differently just now? Kakashi was interrupted from his ruminations by Naruto, who angrily commanded, "Kakashi. Senpai. You're getting distracted, focus." "That's correct," Kakashi replied, concentrating on the current issue. Glaring at Deidara's flying form, the blonde Jinchuriki said, "Anyways. Please. I need you to protect Gaara. I can deal with this guy. He'll be nothing but child's play." After staring at Naruto in silence for a while, Kakashi sighed with exhaustion and nodded slowly. Kakashi glared at his captain and said, "Very well, Taicho. I'll trust you with this guy. But be careful. All right?" At Kakashi's request, the blonde nodded silently. For a few more moments, Kakashi's visible eye remained fixed on the blonde's figure, before he abruptly faded into thin air. The blonde gave Kakashi's location a quick glance before a severe expression appeared on his face. With a slightly menacing tone, the blonde coldly said, "Now to deal with that other blonde," causing the Kyuubi inside of him to avert his gaze in concern. Reaching for the crossbow slung over his back, the blonde aimed it at the insane artist. The blonde shot the arrow, unsaid. The arrow moved quickly in the direction of Deidara's position. But instincts sharpened by hundreds of fights compelled Deidara to turn abruptly and quickly grab the arrow with his one remaining arm. Deidara said, pausing his bird as soon as he realized Kakashi wasn't there. "What the? We weren't informed that you had ranged weapons, Jinchuriki." The blonde said, "Where's that Sharingan having bastard?" Naruto sneered and said, "You don't need to know that." His expression was slightly amused. With his eyes narrowed and perplexed, Deidara questioned, "What are you so smug about?" With a slightly bigger smile, Naruto said, "I was hoping you'd catch that arrow." Deidara blinked and said, "What? Why would you want me to catch this damn arrow?" "I mean, sure, it's an arrow, but what can it do?" But before he could complete his thought, he was cut off, as the most startling thing he had ever seen in his life came to pass. The blonde in front of him was only a few feet away from his position in just 1 second. The following? He saw the blonde standing right in front of him, his arm outstretched. When the blonde Jinchuriki's gauntlets gave off a metallic gleam, the blonde Akatsuki member automatically raised his arm to deflect the blow. What was the outcome? The man cried out in agony as he felt Naruto's hidden blade pierce his bone, driving the blade deep into his arm. With a slight panic, the blonde Akatsuki member kicked the blonde out of his way. His fellow blonde did a few backflips in midair, and the blonde landed on top of one of the taller trees, right at his feet. His icy blue eyes peered into the other blonde's. He fingered Altair's handle, his hood covering the rest of his face. Deidara gave the blonde a stern look, but there was a glint of fear in her eyes. "That technique you just used. It wasn't a body flicker, was it?" "It was. The legendary Hiraishin." "Wasn't it?" he inquired. His fellow blonde gave him a chilly smirk in return. "And if it was?" the Jinchuriki inquired, his icy gaze glaring into Deidara's eyes. With a swallow, Deidara begged Kami to spare him from this. The brat was familiar with the legendary Hiraishin. How on earth was he going to beat the blonde now? The fabled Hiraishin, a jutsu that was both feared and revered among the other hidden villages, as well as in Konoha. Among the most potent and well-known methods to have ever been discovered. A method that, provided a Hiraishin seal was nearby, enabled the user to instantly teleport anywhere. A method. Iwa's Third Great War had resulted from that. Deidara was not an idiot. The war was his formative years. How could he have been unaware of Namikaze Minato's exploits? The yellow flash took the lives of his parents. The proud Jonin of Iwagakure that his parents were, but when Namikaze Minato and others were confronted by them and their platoon, they were completely destroyed, and Iwa began to fear this man greatly as the only one still standing. Actually, now that I think about it, the yellow flash and this brat shared the same blonde hair, the identical azure eyes. The only distinction was that he had a rounder face than the Namikaze. Is that possible? Deidara's eyes widened, showing a little more fear in addition to realization. He said more than inquired, "Eh? Are you the Yondaime Hokage's son?" He was certain of it. That man's son was this boy. He had to be. With a slight tilt of his head, Naruto cast an inquisitive glance at Deidara. Still, his eyes stayed icy. "And if I am?" was his direct question. Deidara yelled, his obvious blue eye glaring at the Jinchuriki with hate. "If you are indeed the bastard's son, I'll kill you. To avenge my parents." So you want to kill me? So you can avenge your parents?" I see. How pathetic," the blonde said, raising an eyebrow. Deidara growled, glaring at the blonde with hate and fury. "What?" she exclaimed. "How dare you be insulted by that bastard son of the Yellow Flash?" The blonde clenched his fist and roared, "Are you insulting me? Bastard child of the Yellow Flash." All Naruto did was give the Akatsuki member in front of him a chilly glare. Was it because of his father's actions during the war that this man wished to kill him? How stupid. There was no need to feel sympathy for the enemy because it was a time of war. It is just killed or be killed in war. That was how things were in the wartime world. In the world of shinobi, that was the norm. But Naruto wanted to alter everything. He was aware that real peace appeared unattainable. He couldn't and wouldn't give up, though. He vowed to Jiraiya that he would battle for peace through bloodshed. He was aware of how ridiculous he sounded. However, he yearned to trust in his teacher's peaceful vision. He was going to make every effort to bring about peace. And the initial action was passing through this Akatsuki member. Returning attention to the current task. The blonde gave Deidara a fierce look. Kurama's eyes narrowed inside the seal. That scowl reminded him of him too much for his comfort. The blonde Jinchuriki said, "I don't need to insult you, Akatsuki san. You do a fairly excellent job of it already." A tiny smile for his fellow blonde. It was enjoyable at times to play with an opponent. After blinking and wondering where that thought had come from, Naruto shrugged and turned to face an anticipatory Deidara. With a genuine look of perplexity, Naruto raised an eyebrow and said, "I'm sorry. Did you say something?" Kakashi, meanwhile, had the sudden urge to give Naruto a manly hug and exclaim, "I did, Minato. Sensei. Into the sky. I turned your son corrupt." Minato felt suddenly as though she should haunt Kakashi from inside the Shinigami's stomach. Deidara saw nothing but blazing red as something inside of him snapped. With an uncontrollably angry and hateful roar, the blonde Akatsuki member hurled a chunk of big clay in her direction. The clay took on the form of a hummingbird, and it took off at a speed that surprised the blonde. But the mere clay animal seemed to be moving at a snail's pace to the blonde Jinchuriki. The blonde casually raised his hand and channeled lightning chakra into his palm, and tightened his grip on the bird with ease. With a gleeful smile, Deidara made the sign of one hand. "Katsu!" he exclaimed. The wind rustling Naruto's robes was the only sound audible. There was so much silence that you could hear the distant chirping of a cricket. While aimlessly tinkering with Deidara's clay sculpture, Naruto questioned, "What was that supposed to do? If you don't mind me asking?" What?" Deidara muttered, his expression shocked. With a bored sigh, Naruto gazed languidly into Deidara's eyes and said, "I'm giving you one last chance. Give yourself up in peace, and I'll make sure your prison cell meets your standards," the blonde Jonin said, his face expressionless. "It's over with you. Child of the Yellow Flash, bastard. I'll murder you and then dispose of your corpse in the center of Konoha. Before I even show you my artwork." With a crazy sparkle in his eyes, Deidara yelled. Glancing at the blonde Akatsuki member, Naruto narrowed his eyes distastefully. "I see. I gave you an opportunity to survive and maybe fight another day. However, you flung it straight back in my direction." With a series of hand gestures, he declared, "I'll kill you, and that's the end of it. I'll defeat you. The Yellow Flash's son." With that, Deidara threw another animal made of clay at the blonde. Water wall. A water style. As a huge wall of water erupted around him, effectively shielding him from Deidara's attack, Naruto let out a cry. "It appears that you get angry easily too. If that really is the situation, then this fight will be easy," Naruto exclaimed, making more rapid hand gestures. Wind style. Fantastic discovery. With a burst of wind from his lips, he yelled. With a curse, Deidara mentally gave the order for his clay bird to avoid the attack. The blonde Akatsuki member managed to avoid the attack and proceeded to throw more clay animals at the blonde. Naruto wondered how the other blonde managed to survive for so long, but the blonde just narrowed his eyes. Was that all the S-ranked criminal used for an attack? Excellent lightning palm with enhanced lightning style. The fair-haired Jinchuriki cried out, simply raising his lightning splattered palm to halt Deidara's clay figure. Having witnessed Kakashi's first use of the Chidori, he came up with the idea for this lightning jutsu. It was the slowest technique in his arsenal, but it was devastating nonetheless, as it was designed to generate lightning in your palm with the destructive power of the Chidori but without the speed. Deidara made a hand gesture after observing the blonde catch his clay animal, Katsu. Once again, nothing happened. Shit. Why won't it function properly? He uttered those words out of frustration. Short inquiry. Naruto asked, piquing Deidara's curiosity, what do you think would happen if clay came into contact with lightning? Akatsuki. San. The fair-haired woman concluded. Damn you. It's pretty obvious that it would, Deidara said, her eyes widening with realization. He uttered angrily. I see you've worked it out. Do you understand now? Once more, Naruto declared, I am the worst opponent you could have. Now, I'll give you one last chance. Give up. The bastard's father was standing next to him, laughing and taunting him, and Deidara could see the yellow flash killing his parents. Oh, how he hated that bastard. He was going to kill this fucker, one way or another. He clenched his fist in rage as he glared at the bastard in front of him. Until you're dead, I won't stop. Ublastard. With a handful of animal clay in his hands, ready to set them off the moment he was close to the blonde, he charged at her with reckless abandon, roaring with pure hatred and rage. For his part, Naruto simply sighed with annoyance, realizing that some people simply never learned. The blonde made a number of hand signals while slowly shaking his head in mild disappointment. Water style. Water dragon. Behind the blonde, a dragon composed entirely of water erupted from the atmosphere, howling as it moved in Deidara's direction. Naruto hummed for a moment before announcing the name of his next jutsu, lightning style, laser circus. But the blonde wasn't done yet. After making a few more hand gestures, the blonde glared at Deidara as he tried to avoid the water dragon. The water dragon was struck by multiple streams of lightning that shot from the blonde palm, infusing it with lightning. When Deidara saw the threat, she tried to flee the target area right away. But Naruto did not let that happen, and he shot a Hiraishin arrow from his crossbow. The arrow seemed to move at impossible speeds because chakra was channeled into the bow, and it made a small sonic boom as it struck the ground behind Deidara. The blonde then appeared behind the older blonde. Swiftly navigating hand signals that would be challenging for most Jonin to follow, even with the Sharingan's assistance, the younger blonde exclaimed, wind style. Vacuum sphere. The wind technique held the blonde in place long enough for the water dragon infused with lightning to slam into Deidara's back, causing the Akatsuki member to cry out in shock and pain. Are you done yet? Naruto asked, standing atop a slightly damaged tree and glaring down at Deidara with crossed arms. The fair-haired Jinchuriki inquired inanely. Deidara rose slowly, his body throbbing with agony, and he glared with one uncovered eye at the Jinchuriki. I'll murder you. I'll obliterate you totally. Similar to how I defeated that other Jinchuriki in my previous fight. With rage, he yelled. Instantly, Naruto's eyes narrowed a little. What did you say? With a lethal edge to his voice, he asked. When he eventually said something that the blonde understood, Deidara smiled and felt satisfied. I said, that I'll take you down. The same way I defeated the other Jinchuriki. All right. Naruto said, his hood eerily hiding his entire face from view save for his deadly scowl on his mouth. You were the one to fight Gaara. And what good is that? Indeed, I defeated that wretched Jinchuriki. With a dark smirk on his face, Deidara boasted, you should have seen his face when I launched my C3 to destroy a very populated area of the village. But, Deidara was blind to the shitstorm he had just thrown himself into. As soon as Deidara finished his sentence, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Glancing down, he saw that blood was oozing from his chest. The blonde Akatsuki member channeled chakra into the wound to halt the bleeding. Slowly turning around, he saw Naruto with his back to him and his sword silently sheathed. Naruto spoke, his voice cold and blank, after a few shocked moments of silence on Deidara's part. I wasn't planning on killing you. I just intended to render you unconscious and transport your severed body back to Konoha for a brief session with Ibiki. However, as of late, I will now reduce your entire body to dust, the fair-haired Jinchuriki uttered, slowly rotating his head. And Deidara froze with terror as crimson-red eyes with slitted pupils stared at him from under the hood, staring into his normal ones. He wondered half-heartedly if it was a good idea to get on the blonde's bad side before he was forced to parry a blow that would have taken his head off if he hadn't been paying attention. Naruto declared simply, "Time to die." The blonde had spoken as though it were true, and there was no hint of smugness or overconfidence in his tone. As his fellow blonde engaged him in taijutsu, Deidara thought, Sasori. Donna. I hope you're having more luck than I am. He was trying desperately to get away from the Jinchuriki. Gazing at the smashed remnants of his main puppet, Sasori thought, Deidara, I hope you're enjoying yourself. Because I'm not. It was easy to see how he got into this kind of situation. It was easy to understand how he got into this situation because he was unable to get the small doll away from him no matter what he did or how many tricks he pulled. In addition, the white-haired girl and his grandmother, a well-known puppet master and legend in her own right, made a somewhat good team despite their occasional arguments. You destroyed my puppet, so I had no choice but to come clean. Impressive, the Akatsuki puppet master said, his voice detached and blank. Chiyo was shocked to see her own grandson in such a youthful form. She could not believe that he had aged at all. It was as though he had simply become immortal. This was simply not possible. No one could be at least in their 20s and look that young. She was skeptical that he could have accomplished that. Nay. Hello, Shiroi. Chama. Is this mine to keep? With an innocent gesture, Chachizero raised Sasori's puppet's long, sharp tail and asked. Chachizero. Shiroi sighed. How come you would want that when you can transform into it so easily? I would like it as a trophy. Please, just please. The tiny doll begged, putting a puppy-eyed gaze on Shiroi and embracing her leg. Shiroi hummed for a few seconds and then nodded silently. Congrats. I'm grateful, Shiroi, Chama. As Chachizero squeezed into Shiroi's leg, he shouted in excitement. What do you think he's doing? Shiroi asked, her face turning serious as she saw Sasori rummaging around in his robes. She glared at Sasori and said, Chiyo-san. A good puppeteer always has extra puppets with him. Chiyo scowled at Sasori as well, as if that clarified everything. With more caution, Shiroi nodded slowly and gave the red-haired man a wary glare. I find it unbelievable that I have to use him. My favorite and strongest puppet. HMPH, you guys are honored. Sasori stopped and extended the scroll he had taken from his robes, channeling chakra into the garments to create a cloud of smoke that covered both him and his creation. It's not every day. When the smoke cleared, Sasori said, people get to lay their eyes on the Sandaime cage. This made room for a puppet with long, black, spiked hair to appear. Impossible. Chiyo choked on her own spit and looked at the Sandaime cage in disbelief. That's the Sandaime cage. She exclaimed. Sasori. Don't claim to be the person who. She veered off. Indeed. The cage did not vanish. Sasori affirmed, I killed him and used his body as the foundation for a new puppet. The black sand started to spill out of the cage puppet, grain after grain. So, Sasori, you are to blame for the demise of two of our cages? Accused. Chiyo gave her grandson a disgusted glare. Sasori said, his eyes slightly narrowing, hey, hold on a second. I had nothing to do with the Sandaime cage's death. Orochimaru alone was responsible for that, he clarified, glaring at his grandmother. It doesn't matter. Sandaime cage, as Shiroi San calls this puppet, is a dangerous one. He employs a highly risky method called iron sand, according to Chiyo. With a lackluster expression, Shiroi said, "Thank you for the warning." At this point, you too. Sasori said, his voice remaining eerily blank, "will die here." After saying that, the three of them saw the Sandame Cage's black sand split into 3 parts, one for each member of the group, and the time for conversation ended. Chio, who was surprisingly agile and nimble for her age, cursed as she repeatedly backflipped to avoid being hit by the black sand. After avoiding several more attacks from the black sand, the elderly Kunoichi looked over at Shiroi to check on her. It was as if she knew exactly when the black sand would strike, seeming to read the sand's thoughts, but Chio knew that was impossible because sand did not have a sentient mind. Instead, Shiroi saw the white-haired girl gracefully and easily deflect every attack directed at her. Thus, it made sense to deduce that the girl with white hair was interpreting its attack patterns. Convinced that Shiroi didn't need help, Chio turned to face Chachizero. She was shocked to see the tiny doll performing cartwheels in midair while treating the whole thing like a game. Shaking her head, Chio turned her attention to her grandson in the Sandame cage, glaring at him as her mind raced through a number of possible strategies. That was all dashed, though, by Shiroi's and Chachizero's subsequent actions. The black sand of the cage attempted to surround and overwhelm the little doll, but to Chio's amazement and shock, the sand stood no chance against Chachizero's relentless barrage. The little doll morphed both of her hands into an exact replica of Altair, with the only difference being that the blade was molded into her arm. The doll started to spin wildly and in an uncontrollable manner. When Sasori realized this, he asked the Sandame cage to remember all of his sand, but it would take some time because it was all over the field. "Hayoi! Chama!" Chachizero exclaimed in a happy, chirpy tone. Chio looked away and saw Shiroi take off from her position on the battlefield. Sasori saw this and tried to have the Sandame cage's bladed right arm stab the white-haired girl, but Chachizero moved in front of the bladed arm, morphing her hands into bladed claws, and the little doll caught and severed the cage's arm. When Shiroi delivered a devastating, bone-shattering kick into the puppet's face, Sasori tried to make his puppet run away from the doll, but he was unable to get it to respond in time. The puppet's face cracked slightly and creaked under the force. It was pitiful to see the Sandame cage blasted away from Shiroi, his forested face on the verge of breaking. "From a cage, I was hoping for a bit more." "Even though he's a puppet," Shiroi said, her tone slightly smug. Chio slightly squinted her eyes and said, "Shiroi-san, don't undervalue him." The elder averted his gaze from the twitching form of the Sandame cage and said, "Even as a puppet, the Sandame cage is highly dangerous." Her concern, however, was unfounded because Shiroi abruptly drove her leg into the wooden chest of the cage, shattering it and strewing wood splinters across the floor. Wanting to be certain that the foolish puppet was completely destroyed, Shiroi silently raised her hand, her palm facing the immobile Sandame cage. Red Yuki started to form in her palm like a tiny ball as a strong red light started to emanate from it. Shiroi smiled broadly as her technique finished forming, and even though it was spoken in a faint whisper, everyone in the cave could hear the name, Sero. The red Yuki shot out of her palm, forming an arc of pure Yuki as it sped toward the prone Sandame cage. When Shiroi stopped directing Yuki into her attack, the Sero gradually vanished, destroying the cage puppet body and everything in its path. The best part was that no human could ever hope to use such a thing, so even if the technique was seen by, say, a Sharingan. Well, you get the idea. The Sharingan would analyze the technique. However, it would not be able to copy it. Shiroi smirked rather darkly. The Sero was by far her favorite and most favored technique. Shiroi was proud to say that she herself taught Naruto the technique, and he had mastered it in just over a week. They then had some hardcore sex. In a private location, of course. Away from prying eyes. Sero was made entirely by Yuki, only Jinchuriki and Yukai could ever hope to even learn such a technique. If anyone else attempted to learn it, then it would only end with utter failure. Jiraiya sneezed somewhere in Konohagakure, thinking that some gorgeous woman was talking about him. He smiled, thinking that all was well. But the woman in the hot spring he was researching on noticed his sneeze, and the unfortunate thing was that they were all Kunoichi. What a horrible day to be Jiraiya the Toad Sanin. Going back to the battle, Sasori watched in shock as his greatest creation was destroyed, and his eyes narrowed a little in rage before he gave Shiroi a disapproving glance that left Shiroi speechless. "You Will be a great substitute as my new puppet, Sasori said, glaring at the girl with white hair with a dark expression. With blood. Red eyes, Shiroi glared at the man, shuddering with pure disgust. She was going to break him, and when she killed him, very, very slowly, she was going to enjoy the look of pure terror on his face. With a disconcerting smile, Chachizero transformed her hand into a massive shuriken and giggled a little while practicing swinging the star-shaped blade. Chio gave her grandson a fierce look before reaching into her robes and extracting 10 scrolls in all. So, Oba-san, you're employing that methodology? With a single raised eyebrow, Sasori questioned. Chio said, yes, I am Sasori. She then opened the scrolls and called forth 10 puppets wearing white cloaks. Ah, the Chikamatsu set of 10 puppets, the white secret technique. It's been reported that you used those exact puppets to completely destroy the castle. But then Sasori trailed off, tossing off his robes to reveal that he was nothing more than a living puppet himself. This fact startled Shiroi a little, and Chio's expression turned gloomy. Indeed, Sasori had become a puppet, just as she had suspected. Can your 10 puppets stand up to my? The Akatsuki's redhead withdrew a scroll from his back, opened it, and let the contents out, creating a thick cloud of smoke that gradually disappeared, revealing Sasori encircled by hundreds of puppets. Red secret technique. Performance of 100 puppets. More than just asking, Sasori's chest parted, allowing hundreds of chakra strings to link to his army of puppets. You demolished a castle with your white secret technique, the 10 puppets from the Chikamatsu collection. I destroyed an entire nation using my red secret technique. 100 puppet performances, the redhead said, casting a cold, lifeless gaze on his grandmother. Sasori, we'll just have to wait and see. Hey, Shiroi-san. Would you kindly leave Sasori to me? You don't have to get involved. This is family business, Chio said with a firm, determined voice. She must not have known who she was. She was, soon to be, Uzumaki Shiroi, wife, fiancé, of Uzumaki Naruto. The greatest, and only man ever worthy of touching her, as Shiroi glared at the elderly woman. She took a deep breath to calm herself. She shouldn't be upset over something like this. She really did not enjoy being told what to do, though, so she will refrain from getting involved in this argument, if only because Chio had succeeded in gaining Shiroi's grudging respect. So, out of deference to Deidara, Shiroi decided to stay out of the way and grabbed a whining Chachizero before jumping out of the crater that was left behind. She sat down, her legs dangling off the edge, and she looked boredly down at the fight that was just getting started, noticing an explosion in the distance that she knew was coming from Naruto's direction. She hadn't seen Naruto lose a fight since he had finished training with Jiraiya, though, so she wasn't concerned. Well, except when it came to a chess game. Smiling slightly, it appears that Naruto decided to take things a little seriously. Narrowing her eyes just a little bit, she concluded that those explosions did not originate from the enemy that Naruto was fighting. The reason for her conclusion was straightforward. She could feel Naruto's chakra levels rising steadily. She gave a slightly menacing sneer, perhaps realizing that she had had more of an impact on her Naruto-kun than she realized. After all, knowing him, she would have preferred to continue testing his opponent's strength before taking matters seriously, but at that moment, he wasn't even bothering to watch his opponent. Instead, he was going straight for the kill. She was excited to see her fiancé's bloodied husband once more and knew Chachizero would love it too. Deidara stared fearfully at the blonde in front of him after he had spent the last few minutes trying in vain to hurt her with his explosive clay. When that failed, he turned to fighting the blonde with human-sized clay goblins. He was very much confident now that he had his clay goblins, after all, and they were great for close-quarters battle, their strength surprisingly powerful considering that they were made of clay, and they could explode at any time. But it was all for naught against the blonde, who faced down the goblins without showing any fear at all. The blonde Jinchuriki even let out a time to get serious a few minutes before a burst of light blue chakra engulfed the field. Although Deidara was unaware of the details, he had a suspicion that his fellow blonde had used only the power of his chakra to cause an explosion. The idea that anyone could possess such a strong and powerful chakra chilled him to the bone. Naruto said, staring at Deidara blankly, "I hope you are done." The blonde Jinchuriki was now staring at Deidara with a blank expression in his eyes and his arms crossed over his chest. Kyuubi, who had just completed giving Shukaku chakra, narrowed his eyes slightly as he observed his opponent. The fox found himself reminded of the blonde. But why did the blonde's demeanor toward his opponent remind him of him? Could it be that? No, it couldn't be. When the fox was first sealed inside Uzumaki Kushina, he had noticed the twinge of Uchiha blood in her veins. At first, this confused him. Why did his previous container have Uchiha blood in her veins? But when he started to thoroughly examine the Uchiha DNA, he was literally shocked to discover that Kushina's grandfather was, in fact, him. It was just pure bullshit as far as Kyuubi was concerned. Back then, during the clan wars, he was one of the most feared warriors of his time, with Hashirama being the most feared, of course. Of course, he was slightly more feared, because of his brutal methods of dealing with someone should they threaten him or his clan. It just wasn't possible. How was it possible in the first place? Additionally, when did he ever have the time to conceive a child? Anyway, the moment Kyuubi realized that he had children, she started to work on suppressing the Uchiha blood in her veins, and it worked, keeping Kushina from ever unlocking her Sharingan. Kurama knew very well that the Sharingan changes Uchiha, so even though he trusted Naruto now, he would never trust him with the Sharingan. Likewise, after Kyuubi was sealed inside Naruto, he set about suppressing the Uchiha blood in his veins, and this time, it worked. The eye that unlocks emotions got its name for a reason. Uchiha people had always isolated themselves from the outside world due to their fear of their own emotions. Their love for someone or something only grew stronger when they activated their Sharingan. The Uchiha's love was far stronger than the Senju's. Since you don't live for several hundred years without learning a little bit about some of the most powerful clans in Konoha's past, Kyuubi was aware of this. When are you going to stop playing games with this guy, brat? Kyuubi questioned, his red eyes fixed on the combat. The blonde answered, his eyes slightly darkening. He hurt Gaara Kyuubi. I plan on showing him just how useless fighting is. And when he realizes the mistake he's done in attacking my friends, only then will I finish him. The blonde was unsure of the reason behind his menacing thoughts, but it didn't matter right now because he still had work to do. Kyuubi let out a small sigh of relief, realizing that the blonde's motivation was to exact revenge on Gaara. He could handle that, but if the blonde was actually changing into another Madara, that was a whole other story. Kyuubi put his head back down and said, just don't take too long, Naruto. The blonde nodded silently, then resumed his blank, uninterested stare at Deidara. All right? Have you had enough of trying to exact revenge? Naruto inquired. Deidara's fists clenched so tightly that they bled as he glared at the blonde, his fists never once managing to land a blow on the blonde during the entire fight. Each time he used his clay arts, the blonde would simply counterattack, negating his attacks with ease and in a way that made them seem like child's play. Deidara was infuriated, finding it insulting that all of his attacks were dismissed with such indifference. You. I'm gonna show you real art. Deidara bellowed, his eyes glimmering manically, and he screamed aloud. Prepare to behold my greatest creation of art. The blonde Akatsuki reached into his pouch and extracted all of the clay within. Deidara then let the mouths in his hands chew on the clay for a few moments before releasing the mass of clay. With a shout, Deidara launched the clay into the air, whereupon it burst into a thick cloud of smoke. Naruto drew his eyes closer together and shifted his feet apart a little bit more gradually. The smoke cleared, revealing a positively gigantic version of Deidara, the only difference being that the double was considerably paler overall, even down to the dark hues of its Akatsuki cloak. I had this reserved for Uchiha Itachi. For now though, you'll just have to make do. With a satisfied smile on his face, Deidara exclaimed. Naruto just gave the enormous Deidara a heated glare. The blonde then silently pulled Altair out of his sheath, causing the blade to spark with red lightning. This was a very intriguing aspect for Altair because, since he was born of Yuki and Kyuubi's chakra, the blade also possessed some of the Kyuubi's chakra. This meant that whenever the blonde channeled his lightning chakra, the blade would transform it into red lightning, increasing its cutting power by almost 100 times. To put it another way, you get the idea. That's a bit overpowered, isn't it? Then again, Madara Uchiha is an overpowered as motherfucker. He's still my favorite character in Naruto though. Naruto channels lightning chakra into the blade, and Altair makes it stronger by almost 100-fold. Deidara's giant clay form started to approach the blonde, who was just giving the enormous creature a glare. Observe authentic art. Deidara gleefully yelled, bringing his fingers into a hand. Sign. Art. Acts as an explosion. Katu. After saying that, the enormous clay version of Deidara started to converge and light started to come out of its interior. Sensing the power behind the explosion, Naruto's eyes widened slightly and he clenched his palms slightly, thinking, perhaps this is the time to learn from his father. Without saying a word, the blonde held up one of his father's special kunai and let it float in midair as he focused intently on the seal engraved on the blade. When the massive clay version of Deidara was finally ready to implode, it did so without a moment's hesitation, blast radius advancing on the motionless blonde Jinchuriki. Clutching his fist after the explosion was successfully absorbed, the blonde turned to face Deidara as a massive explosion appeared precisely 3 or 4 miles away from behind Deidara. Suddenly, a sealing matrix appeared in front of the blonde, with the seals spreading out until they managed to reach about 8 to 9 inches long. Time to teleport this artwork. Naruto joked. As the shockwave approached, Naruto's robes fluttered and the fierce winds tore off his head, revealing his shoulder length golden blonde hair and causing the ribbon that held it in a ponytail to snap. With a sense of helplessness, he watched the ribbon fly off, wondering how he would explain this to Shiroi, who had given him the ribbon as a gift in the first place. How was he going to break the news to her that the ribbon had been sent flying, who knows where? As Deidara was looking at the blonde, she was shocked and slightly in awe of the blonde's appearance. He was standing atop the tree, his robes fluttered in the breeze, his golden blonde hair gleaming brightly, and he had a glare in his blue eyes. The sun was shining behind him, giving him a divine appearance. This is the situation. It's art, Deidara said, remembering how, when they had first met, he had thought that Uchiha Itachi's image was art. However, this previous image was real art, and it made the previous image seem like nothing more than a minor annoyance. When Deidara blinked, the other blonde vanished, and he felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest. Peering down, Deidara saw that Naruto had placed his hand on his chest, exactly where his heart should have been. Completely bewildered, Deidara turned to face the tree the other blonde had been on, only to discover it was empty. How? With a shaky voice and a trickle of blood coming out of his mouth, he asked. Naruto said, it was at that time when I first teleported to you and you caught my first arrow. I had subtly inserted a Hiraishin into your arm when I stabbed you. Yeah, so you could have called the fight off. From the start. Deidara managed to utter, damn why. UN. Namikaze bastard. The blonde Akatsuki swayed on his feet for a few moments before he started to fall to the ground. But before he could hit the ground, Naruto grabbed the other blonde, and he gently lowered the art loving blonde to the ground. Right now, you are dying. Wouldn't. Do you wish to air out a few issues? Looking solemnly at his fellow blonde, Naruto asked. With a small cough, Deidara turned to face the blonde next to him and said, W. What do you want to know? He questioned, sensing that his life was running out and that he should at least be conscious of it. What is the reason for your intense interest in art? Naruto inquired. With a trembling breath, Deidara said, your father in the last great shinobi war killed my parents. My parents were Jonin of Iwa with pride. There were even rumors that my father was running to be Yondaime Tsuchikage. But your father murdered him before the evidence could be verified. I was by then a student at the Iwa Shinobi Academy. When I learned of my parents' passing, a hole appeared in my heart. There was a big hole in my heart that would never get filled. I made an effort to fill that gap. However, nothing I did ever managed to bridge that gap. Deidara gave a small cough before continuing. However, afterwards, I've discovered what will make my heart whole. Art. My heart started to fill with art. I spent all of my free time creating beautiful drawings of my parents. I was willing to leave the academy in order to continue creating art because I was so passionate about it. However, the Sandaime Tsuchikage made it possible to employ my artwork in combat. My hands' mouths let me put clay in them, and they gnaw on it. Deidara coughed again. They are like an explosive tag when they are released, laced with explosive chakra. I soon developed a love for explosions as well. And I started combining explosions with my artwork. My obsession turned into art. It evolved into my step. Parents' replacement. Art replaced my parents in a sense. You substituted the image of art for that of your parents. Some might think that's pitiful. However, I don't think so. I think you were so devoted to your parents that you couldn't bear to see them go. As a result, you included your parents' image in your artwork. Since we are human. Thus, it makes sense that we are looking for a memento of our departed loved ones, Naruto remarked. Your artwork is what brings back memories of your parents for you. In my opinion, my father comes to mind when I see the Hiraishin and the Rasengan. The blonde put his hand on Altair's hilt as he was speaking, and the Kyuubi no Kitsune inside me. Remind me of my mother and my Uzumaki ancestry, Naruto concluded, resting his other hand on his stomach. Deidara observed the man for a while, then his eyes started to get a little glassy. You know. For the offspring of the Cretan I detest the most. You're not at all bad. I'm curious. Would this be a conversation we were having? Should my folks killed yours? The wind rustled the grass as Deidara's eyes went completely glassy. You loved your parents so much that you used their image in your artwork, Naruto said, closing both of his eyes. Similarly, Deidara closed hers. Although your parents' passing served as your inspiration, you were a true artist at heart. Now leave and spend time with your father and mother. May you rest in peace, Yasuraka ni Nemoritame, said the blonde Jinchuriki, rising from his kneeling position. I could never have imagined that a man's motivation would be the passing of his parents. I assumed he just had a passion for art and explosions, Kyuubi remarked. After simply staring at Deidara's lifeless form, Naruto silently formed multiple clones and gave them the command, dig a grave for him. The clones nodded silently and went about their work. I will never understand why you show such respect to your enemy's corpse, Kyuubi said, raising an eyebrow. After a few minutes, the clones ceased their work, and Naruto remained silent, only closing his eyes, and waiting for his clones to complete their assigned tasks. Observing the now 12-inch deep hole, Naruto advanced to Deidara's corpse and carefully lifted the deceased blonde. Then, he returned to the Deidara's grave and carefully lowered the body into it. He glanced at his clones, who nodded and started burying the artist. Glancing around the field, Naruto discovered a large enough rock for his purpose. Grabbing the rock and setting it close to the head of Deidara's grave, he buried it shallowly. Taking out one of his throwing knives, he stabbed in Deidara's name. After staring at the recently made grave for a while, he leapt into the tree line. As Chiyo destroyed the final of Sasori's 100 puppets, Shiroi watched with interest. The fight had lasted several minutes, but it was violent and extremely tense. While some of Chiyo's puppets were overwhelmed and destroyed during the battle, Chiyo, being the puppet master that she was, of course made up for it by being able to destroy 20 or more puppets every time one of hers was destroyed. Shiroi didn't believe it, but the old woman had actually managed to defeat 100 puppets with her 10 puppets. Amidst the battle, Shiroi had spotted a massive mushroom-shaped cloud far away. Raising an eyebrow, she pondered what could be so far away. Then, she recalled that Naruto, Kakashi, and the other guy were engaged in combat in that direction. Assuming the cloud was an explosion, she deduced that it was far from Naruto's location because she could sense his chakra even at a distance. Satisfied that her love was fine, she returned her attention to the altercation taking place beneath her. Chachizero was getting a little twitchy in the fight, and Shiroi had to stop him several times before he could jump right into the fray and deal some serious damage to the enemy. As Chiyo stated, she had no right to intervene because this was her fight in the first place. Nevertheless, that didn't stop her from accidentally knocking a poisoned Senbon off course or accidentally stopping a kunai from striking Chiyo in return. Hey, it didn't mean she wasn't going to find a way to pass the time when she wasn't involved in the fight. When Sasori himself destroyed Chiyo's last puppet, her focus was drawn back to the fight. All of his work, his puppets, the Sandame Cage, his 100 puppets technique, decades of work, countless hours spent working on his puppets, all of it ruined by some old woman, a small white-haired girl, and her little pet. Sasori said, his eyes narrowing and his voice carrying a hint of anger. Sasori felt hate flare up inside of him for the first time in a long time. There was no doubt that he was going to kill them, and he was going to do it in the most heinous, twisted way imaginable. Only then would he end their miserable lives, using their bodies as his new puppets, after he had broken their bodies beyond recognition. The gleam in Shiroi's eyes told her everything she needed to know as she glared at the S-ranked criminal. They needed to get this done quickly. She looked at Chiyo and saw that the older woman was breathing heavily, but she was still standing and getting ready to fight her grandson no matter what, and Shiroi's respect for her increased significantly. "I'm going to murder you all," Sasori said menacingly, "and use your remains as the foundation of my new puppets." Blades whirled wildly, dripping with poison. Chambers opened up in his puppet body. Trying not to just sit there, Shiroi leapt to his defense in front of Chiyo and said, "Sorry, but I'll be taking over from here, Chiyo." When Shiroi glared at Chiyo with her bloodshot, red eyes, she felt her breath catch in her throat. Chiyo had opened her mouth to argue with the white-haired girl. "I promised to take care of this. Thus, just take a seat down and permit me take care of this. Acquired it." The girl with white hair spoke in a dangerous way. Chiyo swallowed and nodded slowly before springing back a few meters to put her tired bones to rest. As she hovered close to Shiroi's head, Chachizero laughed. "Shiroi. Chama. Will we now be partaking in the enjoyment?" she inquired naively. Shiroi replied, grinning in her blood. Red eyes glimmering crazily with bloodlust, "Of course, Chachizero. It appears that you are the first to pass away." "Very well," said Sasori, and in less than a second, the red-haired puppet lunged toward the white-haired girl, his blades whirling in a frenzy as he crossed their distance. As she sidestepped the spinning saw blade that was trying to cut her in half, Shiroi maintained her grin of pure bloodlust. She tilted her head in time to see several shurikens fly past her, the shurikens that were fired from the secret compartment in Sasori's right hand. But Shiroi could not avoid Sasori's left arm blade. Though she managed to raise her forearm to make sure the blade would not pierce her face, it did so anyway, and Shiroi's smile widened slightly. Shiroi seized hold of Sasori before he could react, holding onto his arm so tightly that her strength caused his wood-encrusted arm to creak. "Chachizero!" she exclaimed. The small doll materialized behind Shiroi in an instant, transforming her whole right arm into a weapon resembling a scythe with a sharp tip and a jagged edge. The doll struck Sasori's arm, severing it in two, and dealing serious harm to the puppet master. Sasori, having lost his right arm, leapt back to try and get some separation. Shiroi looked down at her broken arm, then raised it to take a closer look. "I just gave you a poison injection with that strike," Sasori said, ending the exchange. "You'll be dead in a matter of minutes," he said. Before raising her wounded arm to her lips, Shiroi kept her bloodshot eyes fixed on her wound. Sasori interrupted, his eyes displaying shock at Shiroi's next move. "What are you planning on do?" After biting into her arm with her fangs piercing it deeply, the white-haired girl started to suck out the poison inside of her arm. A few moments later, she moved her arm away from her lips and started to spit the poison out of her mouth. "Disgusting," she uttered as she kept spitting out the poison. "Impossible." She managed to suck out the poison before it could do any real damage to her. But the only creature capable of such a thing is. So she is of that kind. This battle just got more difficult, Sasori thought, his eyes displaying something close to shock. "How should I kill you, I wonder?" Shiroi growled at the S-ranked criminal after finishing expelling the poison from her lips. "Perhaps I ought to shatter your entire deformed body into a myriad of tiny fragments. Alternatively, perhaps. It seems like I should aim for your heart inside your fake chest," the girl with white hair said. "Decisions, decisions. So many choices," she continued. Sasori stiffened a little, and his last arm transformed into shuriken, a spinning demon wind. Shiroi cast a sidelong glance in Chachizero's direction, narrowing her eyes at the red-haired puppet. The little doll charged at the S-ranked criminal, and as the green-haired doll swung her copy of Altair, Chachizero giggled maniacally before her arm changed into a copy of Altair. The little doll continued to giggle maniacally as Sasori countered by blocking the strike with his own blade. Chachizero's other arm changed into a scythe, and she swung it, intending to chop off Sasori's head. Sasori, however, showed why he was an S-ranked fighter by avoiding the blow and counter-attacking by slamming his elbow into the doll's face. The green-haired female doll slowly turned her head to give Sasori a blood-lustful smile, her green eyes gleaming madly. A small crack formed on Chachiziro's face, and the area was eerily silent, that is, until it was blasted with killer intent so intense, and filled with so much blood lust that it would have made Uchiha Madara green with envy. Well, that was a hit. She gave me a compliment. But now. Before Sasori could respond, the small doll moved both of her arms into two large spike balls and said, "Hold still. Let me show you how hard I can hit. Would you please?" Sasori's eyes widened at the speed at which the balls were launched, and he just about avoided one that nearly struck his head squarely. She asked sweetly, and she launched the balls at him without hesitation. Sasori watched warily as the doll pointed only behind the S-ranked criminal, Chachiziro, but when he turned around, he saw the same spiked balls he had dodged reroute and start to close in on his form again. He glanced at the chain that linked Chachiziro to the two weapons, then had to duck a blow that was headed straight for his legs. The red-haired Akatsuki member was made to play cat and mouse with Chachiziro and those two of her weapons. Sasori decided that enough was enough and started to spin the Demon Wind Shuriken in his hand before hurling the blade at the green-haired doll. Chachiziro responded by shifting her arms into a weapon that resembled a bladed shield and batted the shuriken away. Sasori's voice spoke from behind her, "It's over." She whirled to try to slam the bladed shield into the man's face, but she was not quick enough, and Sasori's bladed arm was about to pierce the little doll's head. But that was stopped when Sasori was struck in the jaw with a punch, sending the red-haired man flying for several meters before skidding to a stop. "I appreciate you luring him away, Sha-chan. However, as of late, I should stop putting things off. I have no doubts that Naruto-kun is almost finished fighting. So I'll just wrap things up here," Shiroi said, her blood-red eyes changing from a menacing pink to a terrifying red as a pink Yuki aura seeped from her petite frame. "Always happy to assist." "Hello, Shiroi. Chama." The doll answered. "She has been holding back this entire time?" Sasori thought to himself as he slowly stood up and his eyes widened in shock. Shiroi grinned a little before she shot off, her monstrous speed tearing apart the ground behind her. "She isn't as fast as the Raikage, Naruto, or Minato, but she is fast enough to cause some damage to the ground beneath her." Sasori's eyes widened as he attempted to sidestep the attack that was coming straight at him. However, he was unable to react quickly enough, and Shiroi punched him in the wood-like face. He then quickly elbowed the human puppet in the neck, sending splinters flying. Without displaying any mercy, the blonde girl launched herself into the air and kicked the living puppet as well. The blonde vampire then proceeded to perform acrobatic moves and beat the living daylights out of the puppet master with a series of combinations. Shiroi concluded her combos by giving the man a kick to his wood-hardened stomach that was so powerful that it broke the ground beneath him. Silently landing on the ground, Shiroi started walking slowly towards the formed crater, stopping at its edge and grinning at Sasori's shattered form. With his legs positively shattered into so many pieces, his chest area caved in, his only working arm broke off and lay somewhere in the battlefield, his neck caved in several places, and his head with several cracks and cave-ins. Sasori's puppet body was beyond human comprehension, and any normal human would have died instantly. This scene would have been more graphic than it is now if it had been a typical human. With a dark chuckle, Shiroi raised her arms and asked, "Any final remarks?" With a red Yuki starting to form in her palm, she asked. After closing his eyes for a while, Sasori opened them again. "Yes. It concerns a specific Sannin. Under the alias Orochimaru. You've undoubtedly heard of him," he remarked. Shiroi's features briefly flashed curiosity before she scowled and gave the order, "Go on. I have an appointment with an informant of mine who has been spying on Orochimaru in a few days. The address is the Tenchi Bridge, which is close to Grass Country. That's the correct location, right? However, considering my health right now, I doubt I can have a meeting with him," Sasori concluded, nodding. As a sign of respect, Shiroi gazed at the man for a few moments before her sero started to shrink until it was only the size of a softball. She said, "I won't destroy your entire body," just before the softball sized Cerezo was fired in a beam like motion, piercing Sasori right through to his heart, the only aspect of him that was human. Chachizero. Shiroi turned and walked out of the nearly destroyed cave they were in, saying, "We going now." Chachizero eagerly followed, a little disappointed that she wasn't able to do more in the battle, but hey, it was awesome enough to watch her master win the entire fight. With dinner plate sized eyes, Shio looked at her grandsons now. Truly dead body with sadness before following Shiroi shortly after finally overcoming her shock. Gaara drifted slowly through the pitch blackness, unsure of how long he had been there. He had long since lost all sense of time, remembering only to save Yui's plummeting form before going completely dark. All of the glares, the terrified looks, the pain, the sorrow, the loneliness, he would rather suffer through all of that than be in this never ending darkness because it was so cold and hollow. Strange, the only thing he can recall is a girl named Yui. Was she significant to him? Was she valuable in any way? Wasn't he a demon or what? It was all so confusing, this darkness. He had no idea what was coming. Gaara. Was Gaara even his name, and if so, why did that voice sound so familiar? Gaara. He knew it was important to him, but who was it for? Gaara. Awaken. Why did it sound as though the darkness was being lifted? Gaara, my companion. My sibling. Please get out of bed. He now recalls that voice, which had kept him safe from his own darkness, was the source of all of his happiness and the reason that everything he owned and that brought him joy even existed. When Gaara's sea-green eyes opened, he briefly had blurry vision before it cleared and he became immediately drawn to someone with blonde hair. Naruto, he spoke slowly. Hey Gaara. Naruto grinned at the young Kazekage. You gave us all quite the scare, he said amiably, giving the redhead a shoulder pat while a few happy tears welled up in his eyes. Gazing past Naruto, Gaara saw Kakashi grinning at him, Elder Chiyo smirking subtly at the sight, and a girl with white hair who smiled slightly at the touching scene. Gaara then surveyed the area with his eyes, which grew wide with shock upon seeing dozens, no, thousands of Suna shinobi, all of whom were crying as they gazed upon their Kazekage. Sama, Kazekage. They all cheered and let out happy cries when they saw that their Kazekage was safe. Gaara was watching all of this in shock, not believing that this was really happening, but he was most interested in one cheer. Gaara. A black blur tackled him, making Naruto lean back to avoid being hit as well. The black-haired figure hugged Gaara tightly, causing her to let out little sighs of happiness. Yui? Gaara inquired quietly. Black hair moved, and Yui smiled broadly as her lovely yellow eyes met his sea-green ones. Gaara smiled a little too, but he was taken aback when Yui leaned forward and kissed him. Suna's shinobi were all in awe of the display, and even some of Gaara's fangirls couldn't contain their amazement. Naruto grinned at the scene, feeling something cling to his side. The blonde, blinking, looked up to see Shiroi snuggling into his robes, grinning at the scene in front of her. Naruto grinned again, putting his hands around Shiroi and forcing her to give his neck a light kiss, finishing with a playful lick. The doll giggling as she found herself trapped in the blonde's hair, she laughed at the red color of Naruto's face and laughed even more when Chachizero chose to perch on her head. When Kakashi saw the scene, he grinned broadly because it appeared as though they were a family. Minato. Sensei. Kushina. San. You would be proud of Naruto. I have no doubt about this. I myself am proud of him, despite having taught him very few things. It won't be long until Naruto reaches his true potential, and he'll be the greatest shinobi in history. I can feel it, Kakashi said, looking up at the sky and forgetting his icha-icha. He closed his eye and sighed happily, with a hint of melancholy. The masked Jonin turned to face the cheering forms of everyone and grinned again, telling them that this was a happy and joyous moment and that such thoughts should not be entertained because the present was what really mattered and the future could wait. Kakashi then joined in the cheers. A single Sharingan eye, unseen by the others, gave them a mocking glance before vanishing.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.